Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Business and HR Strategy and Budget Planning Summit with Hacking HR. I am your host and moderator for this session. I'm Lauren Lefkowitz. I am an executive coach and fractional CHRO. And my business is Fine is a Trap Coaching, because fine is not a feeling that we have. We have much stronger feelings than that. I'm really excited today to be leading the Designing Q4 Engagement Strategies to Drive Retention session. Such an important topic, and Q4 is often a time when we just feel like we're in catch-up mode and wrap-up mode. And so we're going to talk about things you can do to take care of yourself and your organization during Q4 to increase retention. I'd like to welcome all of the panelists to the screen, and amazing. Thanks for being here, everyone. I'm really excited to get this conversation started. I'm going to ask you each to introduce yourselves, tell us who you are, what you do for work, where in the world you are, and why this topic is important to you. And we'll just go in the order on the screen: Prudence, Nicole, Amber, and then Cassandra. Or Cassandra, you'll correct me on whichever one it is. And then let's get started. Go ahead, Prudence.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Hi, Lauren. Thank you so much for being our moderator, and thanks for the warm welcome. Prudence Spitter. I am an HR leader. I've been in the HR space for over 25 years. I am in Greenwich, Connecticut. I currently work in the technology sector, supporting HR in 20 plus countries. And I commute into New York City most days, but today I'm sitting in Greenwich, Connecticut. Really excited for this conversation today. Certainly looking forward to the comments and questions we will get from our audience, and certainly looking forward to engaging with and learning from my fellow panelists. The conversation around overall strategy and ensuring that we're prepared for the year ahead, it's really important as HR leaders to be continuous learners is one thing I mention regularly to my mentees. And I believe having this opportunity to pause and to reflect on the business and to impact change as it relates to the future of HR, that makes me excited for this topic today.
Good morning, Lauren, the Hacking HR community, my fellow panelists. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me. My name is Nicole Dubois. I am Chief Human Resources Officer at GRAM. GRAM is a child, family, and community serving organization based in New York City. I'm proudly donning some of my GRAM swag this morning. There are a few interesting facts about GRAM, but one of them happens to be that we are a part of ELIZA, Hamilton's legacy. And so in, that Broadway musical that some of you may have heard of, Hamilton, in the final scene, there, is mention of an orphanage. And so that was us back in 1806. So we have rich history in this country, but today we are exclusively based in New York City, again, serving children, families, and communities. I've been a part of GRAM for a little over 19 years and have the pleasure and privilege of leading a group that includes human resources, learning and development, and a really neat team that we call Team Experience and Engagement. And I'm so happy to be a part of this very timely, conversation. And I look forward to all the questions that come in. Thank you.
Hi there. My name is Amber Myers, and I'm located in the DC metropolitan area. So I serve as an HR business partner at a government IT consulting firm, and that's where I support multiple business sectors and just lead initiatives around employee engagement, leadership development, well-being. So alongside my role, I've been able to build a strong focus on integrating research and just practice and organizational psychology with a special interest in how leadership behaviors like influence workplace culture and just employee satisfaction as a whole. So when I think of Q4 engagement strategies, I think these are critical because they balance the end of year performance pressure with recognition and care for our employees. So helping to prevent that burnout and setting just a strong foundation for the end of the year. So I'm excited to contribute to today's discussion and share both practical experience and just, maybe some research insights on how HR can drive this meaningful impact.
Hi, I'm Cassandra Lowry. Thank you everybody for joining today. So I will say, my last role, I was actually in an employee engagement consultancy because employee engagement is like my passion point, my background. My master's is in organizational psychology, and my last company, I worked for an HR tech organization where I got to work with hundreds of clients and basically coach them around their employee engagement strategy, and even just the overall organizational health and employee experience strategy, because of course, they all go together. Employee engagement's not separate from all those other pieces. It is something that is a part of it. But I found myself really wanting to actually get back into the HR seat. So my current role is Global Human Resources Manager at a smaller company based in New York City. We are in the digital identity space, so advising around fraud, a multi-factor authentication, all those different areas that are so important to a company's digital footprint and really protecting their data and their customers. And so in my current role, I handle all the different aspects of HR now, not just employee engagement. So I kind of get to be back into it and on the ground. I'm basically a one-person HR team as well. So I know that struggle, even though it's really great to make that impact and really build something from the ground. And so I've been in the overall HR space for over a decade. Like I said, I have a background in organizational psychology. I'm located actually out of Ohio, so I am a remote individual. I know what it's like trying to balance in-office locations with remote. We also do have a global employee base, so I get to work with other groups and think about the culture even across functions and locations. And I guess I'll just wrap up with saying, like I alluded to earlier, engagement is not something separate. Engagement it's a part of the overall employee experience. It's a part of the culture. Engagement is a living, breathing thing. And for those, individuals who kind of fail to remember that, it's one of those aspects that if you're not actively working on your culture, if you're not actively working on your engagement, it starts to backslide. And so this is why it's so important that while engagement is impacted and it's a part of things like retention and performance management, it is really important to also focus on employee engagement and be really proactive with what strategy you're going to have in place.
And we have one more panelist who's joined us, Anselm, and I'll ask you to introduce yourself. And then once you've told us who you are, where in the world you are, what work you do, and why this topic is important to you, after you introduce yourself, we'll ask you to figure out if you can turn your video because you are currently horizontal. So if you can, just introduce yourself for us.
Okay, thanks. I was actually here for about 15 minutes here. Not sure what's happening, but thanks. My name is Ansel. I currently engage.
I'm sorry to interrupt. It's very difficult to hear you. Your volume is incredibly low.
Can you hear me now?
Better. Thank you.
Okay, right. Yes, my name is Ansel. I was saying that I was actually here about 15 minutes earlier. I'm not sure what's happening, but I will sort that out. And I'm currently engaged with I'm in the non-for-profit sector as the manager overseeing West and Central Africa, and which is a bit different from most of the panelists here. I have spent most of my 80% of my career in the NGO sector and 20% in the business sector, where I did consulting, I did Asia transformation. I'm based in Abuja, which is Nigeria, West Africa, the capital of Nigeria. Why this topic is important to me is because, like one of the panelists did say, engagement is something that we can't overlook. And Q4 is also a very decisive moment in the workspace, in that that's where two forces actually meet. That's where meeting the last mile goals actually taking place. That's also where burnout takes place. That's where all the challenges take place. And this is where we either can recontract commitment to our organizations or can just let the ball drop. And so I'm really excited to be here and also to learn from the panelists. Thanks.
Thank you so much. We are still having a little bit of cutting out on your sound, and we've got you sideways. So if you wouldn't mind just putting yourself on mute while you're not speaking, and then seeing if you can fix that technical issue. It's not a fun morning unless we have a tech issue, right? Or afternoon or evening or night, wherever we are in the world. So thank you for introducing yourself. We're glad to have all of you here. Our first question that we're going to discuss is, why do so many organizations underestimate Q4 engagement? It seems like we get into Q4 and there's this big panic to wrap up the year, to bring in the final money, to finish the final reports. And then, December comes and we have either this mad rush for work or this like total disengagement and everybody on vacation. Why do you think that happens? And how do we start to not treat this as just a wrap-up period? We can go in any order, just come on off mute when you're ready to talk.
I'm happy to start us off. So just really building off of what you said, Lauren, I feel like organizations, they underestimate Q4 because, like you said, they're so focused on closing the books, hitting those numbers, and just, moving on to the next fiscal year. And so I feel like in that mindset, the risk is that employees feel like the year ends, with a transaction and not a connection, to them as employees. And so when Q4 is treated as this like wrap up portion of the year, the message tends to be that employees receive is that, the people matter less than the deliverables. And that's when, that disengagement solidifies into turnover, at the start of the next year. And so I think it's really important for us to start looking at the employee engagement, especially in Q4. I think that's probably one of the most important timeframes.
I agree with you, Amber, that there is this shift, right? And certainly building off what Lauren has said as well. I also see it as, in organizations that I've been a part of, this necessary pause, if you will. So you go through the summer months, you do have that downtime. Usually at the end of August, beginning of September, like things start to really ramp back up. And in that October, November period, a lot of organizations are either drafting or finalizing their business plan or their strategic plans for the following year. And in December, a lot of individuals, as you mentioned, are taking time off. And there is this kind of breath of fresh air of, I've done the work work to prepare for 2026 or the following year. And then now I'm really starting to give myself grace because I'm going to dive back in, right? That first week in January. That is a crucial time for organizations to engage employees, as was mentioned before, because one, the organization, it's important that whatever the momentum is continues. And two, that those employees who are probably newer with the organizations or who are really committed, that they don't see where there's loss of momentum with leadership. So having that pulse on the organization, having a pulse on the employee, and having that continuity is so very important.
So, agree 100%. And I would say in response to your question, Lauren, that sometimes sort of the importance of that level of engagement at that point of the year is underestimated because organizations are focused on delivering on strategy and on, sort of making sure that, sort of the all the details of the business are flowing. But what we've noticed is that there happens to be, when you really pay close attention to this, which is similar to what Prudence was saying, a trend around this that actually, in our experience, Q4 sometimes is when we see departures, right? We see people actually exiting the organization. And so having a real sense and, keeping our eye on what we're noticing in terms of trends causes us to be more thoughtful about keeping engagement, sort of steady throughout the year, and certainly without, not paying attention to that in Q4. So that becomes really important. Is what we've sort of noticed. But I think that's the reason why is I know in our experience we're starting at the top of the year, really clear about our vision, our strategy, sort of leading out with that, and then if we allow that to happen, we sort of lose sight of, oh my gosh, at the that final period of the year, it becomes just as important, if not more important, to re-engage and to engage our community.
Yeah, and I guess I'll just wrap things up there. Of very much agree with everything that everyone said around. It's the continuity. It's really being intentional and thoughtful about that strategy. But also, I think it's important to note it's something that HR always struggles with, especially when it is a smaller team, is that balance between the transactional and the strategic. As HR, we're always getting pulled into fires, and that's part of our job. And unless an HR team really thinks about planning out their employee, you can name it differently, but their employee experience, calendar, their, people operations calendar, you really need to plan that out in advance and say, here's when we're going to do performance management. Here's when we're going to, do a specific initiative around engagement, or, we'll do these through the whole year, and we'll have these little pieces that build up into, employee engagement or even another HR initiative. I think it's so important to plan out that calendar. Make sure you get leadership buy-in so that you have a leader who is, or leaders ideally, who are helping you to really champion these HR aspects. Because if you don't make sure you're planning ahead, you're going to find yourself by year end, naturally, you have all these fires. You've gotten so distracted with the transactional aspects of HR that you've not had enough chance to really step out of it and think about the strategic aspects of HR and think about those important things that usually take more mental energy of our employee experience. Like, let's think about how we make sure to be proactive and not let Q4 become this, I think maybe Prudence, you might have mentioned this, like transactional instead of, this relationship connection.
I'll just probably add one to it. I hope my volume is clear now. Is it clear from your end?
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
No, I want to find out if my volume is clear now.
Your volume is clear, but you are still sideways, and it's a little distracting. And Ansem, if you can be on mute when you're not speaking, we've gotten some background noise from you, and we'll bring you right in on the next question.
Okay, great.
Now I've been on mute. Our next question is, and all of you alluded to it a little bit. Amber, you said it first. The last quarter can feel really transactional, and all of you said that there's like a lot to wrap up. There are a lot of things to do, and that last quarter we sort of get lost in performance reviews, wrap up, etc. So let's talk about how do we not make this transactional. Let's talk about HR's role in partnering with managers to engage employees and retain employees during Q4 so that everybody comes back excited for Q1. What is HR's role in this, and what is the manager's role?
I view it as the manager being the owner of the employee relationship and HR being the support and partner in those conversations. So in my experience, I spend a lot of time reviewing data points and helping the managers make sense of the data points and also articulate that as it relates to either team conversations or one-on-one conversations. So sometimes it's convincing to let the managers know that they lead the conversation. However, if HR is leading from a place of saying, these are some of the conversations that you should be having, quite frankly, all year round, but certainly ensuring that they're definitely happening in the period of time where a manager may be out for a week and an employee's out for a week and it's different weeks, how are they ensuring that they keep the momentum going and they're not at the end of November saying, we'll revisit that in January, because that's a critical period of time when some organizations and some industries might pause, but others do not. And so if your employees are getting attention externally, it's likely that after those, Q1 bonuses are paid out, you could see an exit, mass exodus from the organization. So I try to share those data points with leaders. What has the trends shown from previous Q4s, and what are some of the ways that we've successfully retained great and top talent within the organization, and reminding managers of those strategies that they can tap into during Q4.
I'll jump in with maybe two practical aspects too, if I may. I think, two practical actions you can take as an HR partner is to have a tool in place. I think it's very helpful to gather those data points. And so a lot of times we think about, okay, once a year, maybe twice a year, a big employee engagement survey. Don't get me wrong, I love those because I'm somebody who's done a lot of data analysis and digging into insights. But those are like those full scale, you go to the doctor and get the full diagnostic of everything. I think it's really important to do more of those continuous touch points. So more like a pulse survey. Maybe it could be, some organizations do like just a couple questions weekly. Others do, maybe like up to a dozen monthly. And so getting a pulse on your employees and kind of how they're feeling, do you feel supported? Just some of those basic questions around well-being, stress management, capacity levels, goal support. And so I think that's a practical piece, is making sure there's that tool in place to gather those data points. And then the secondary piece is, as HR, coaching managers on how they have those touch point conversations. So, a lot of organizations believe in one-on-ones. I certainly think they're very important to check in on your employees, whether weekly or biweekly. And so don't just think about checking the box with one-on-ones, but make sure HR is helping to coach managers around one-on-one should be quality conversations, and giving them even a little guide on like, here's kind of what one-on-one should be. Here's some questions you might ask, making sure it's a quality conversation and not just a, like I said, check in on status, check the box type thing.
Absolutely. And, we do engagement surveys, pulse surveys. And I think one of the really important pieces for human resources is that we ensure that we're not just collecting data for the sake of collecting data, but so we have a practice of, we administer the survey and we share back out with our workforce. This is what we hear you saying, and this is the actions that these are the actions that we're taking, to be responsive. And so that becomes a really critical, piece of that. And then to partner, similar to what has been said already, with leaders to make sure that going into the next, sort of quarter, right, or the next year, that we're really clear on, strategically, how are we going to, at a manager direct report level going to engage folks? So does that mean that in the next year, because of what we learned, stay conversations become really important? And so that's something that we're going to coach, our leadership team around. Or does it mean that the way we're noticing that one-on-ones are not happening consistently? So we're going to really provide, strategic support across the organization on making sure that that's happening, or the way that performance reviews are happening. So really using the data to learn, but sharing back out, really concretely. We're not just collecting it. This is what we heard, and really being clear on what we're doing, in response. And that really is, as was clear from your original question, Lauren, that really involves a really close relationship between human resources and then what's happening, at a local level between managers and their teams.
Yes, so I agree with what everyone has stated, and really like what I am hearing, and I essentially just to wrap up this question, I really think of HR's role as the architect and the coach. We are designing those frameworks, we're sharing those insights, and we're giving the managers the tools to engage their teams effectively. So we're looking at the big picture. We're looking at what the data says, where are the retention risks, and what practices actually drive that engagement and commitment with our employees. And when it comes to the manager's role, that's how they bring it to life in the more personal way, because they're on the field. They're with them on a day-to-day basis. They're the ones who know their people. They can have those one-on-one conversations with them, and they can recognize contributions that feel authentic to their team because they're with them on a day-to-day basis. So I feel as if when HR and managers, they work in tandem with one another, with HR creating that structure and the managers ultimately creating that experience, engagement in Q4 just becomes much more than that check the box exercise. It becomes that retention strategy. It becomes a part of the culture ultimately. So it's both strategic and that human connection that we need.
Thank you so much. These are such rich answers. I do want to mention that unfortunately, Anselm has continued to have the tech issues, so we won't be bringing him back to the stage. But if you are interested in learning more from him about HR practices in Nigeria specifically, please do connect with him on LinkedIn and connect with all of these panelists and me on LinkedIn. We are clearly people who are active in the community, and the more community you have, the better you are. So our next question is, for those of you working with remote or hybrid or global employee populations, how do you make sure your retention strategies work across the board and nobody feels left out or isolated in their home or away offices?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's so many things that you can do to make sure, your global employee base feels supported and feels like they are experiencing that overall employee experience. I think two things come to mind for me. And again, there can be so many more than this, but making sure that you're able to get individuals together. I know it's not easy. I know it can be costly, but even if you're able to make sure, leadership goes to another location, like our company, I said, is based out of New York City, but we have a pretty big office in Lisbon and Porto, Portugal. And so our leadership goes, at least once or twice a year to go, spend time with the employees. We always make sure that, even when leadership's not there, but we always do in-person events, typical like the holiday party at the end of the year and other things. And so we really make sure that we're thinking of not just in person, getting together, building relationships, but also those tools that help with async connections, like, Slack and Teams and things like that. So I think that's a really big important thing, is making sure people get a chance to build relationships in person every once in a while, really connecting them there. But I also think maybe a little bit more of a tactical piece is making sure things are as fair as you can make it across employee bases, because it's hard. Different countries, different locations, you'll have different employment law things you have to consider with like benefits and what you provide around PTO and vacation. But for where you can, really try and make sure it is consistent across all parties, so that one location doesn't feel like another has an unfair advantage around, benefits or just the richness of what they are given. And so really thinking about that is, yes, it's a tactical item around, rewards and benefits, but it is something that really does impact engagement, people perceiving the fairness of the organization.
That
Absolutely.
was so really well said. The one thing I will add, because you covered a lot of what we currently do and what I would have shared, the one thing I'll add is skip level meetings and giving visibility to upper leadership is really critical, and doing so in a time zone friendly way. So in many organizations, depending on the size, a skip level meeting might not be a one-on-one, it might be a group meeting. And so rotating the times when those meetings are held to incorporate different time zones is really critical. So in my world, usually the team in Singapore or Tokyo tend to be the ones that are joining in the middle of the night. So if we're rotating those times, we'll ensure that everyone in different time zones experience the inconvenience, if you will, versus only those in the APAC region experiencing that inconvenience. So whether it's a calibration meeting or a skip level meeting or a global Teams call, making sure that it's not at the same time that's most convenient for the leader, but rotating that also helps with the inclusion and also helps with others feeling that the processes are fair.
Here exclusively in New York, but I'm an avid international traveler. So as you were mentioning all these different countries, thank you very much, because you've added to my bucket list, Cassandra and Prudence. But we are hybrid, even though we're exclusively in New York. And so I think, a lot of the strategies mentioned end up being really important. I would only add that, we have a solid communications team. And so making sure that folks are engaged with what is going on across the organization via our newsletters becomes incredibly important. We have a wellness committee that every single Wednesday shoots out its own sort of infographic and wellness initiatives via its own newsletter to keep folks engaged in healthy habits and ways to take care of self. And so that becomes incredibly important as well. And then, we do find intentional ways to bring people together in person. So whether that's, a staff appreciation event, and that's actually in person. And then we have monthly all staff meetings, which are virtual. And so that brings folks together, whether they're, part-time or on-call or full-time, and regardless of what their schedules are, even though we're in the same time zone, but brings them together for updates shared by our president and CEO and leadership across the organization. So I think it's just about being consistent in ways that are meaningful to bring folks together and to ensure that engagement is, something that's alive and, is present for everybody across.
Yeah, I agree with everything that, that everyone said. Nicole, took one of the words out of my mouth, intentionality when it comes to including everyone. So I feel like too often when it comes to this recognition or engagement, these activities, they tend to be designed for, the in-person employees, those who are at the headquarters office or something of that sort. And so a lot of times those who are hybrid or remote, they tend to feel left out. So I feel like, again, like many of us, stated on this panel, build that flexibility. For the town halls, add in a virtual component to that, create digital recognition boards. So it's not something that's just in the office when it comes to recognition. Or I think Prudence mentioned, scheduling activities across time zones as well. So those are the signals that, every employee, I feel like regardless of where they sit, they'll feel equally involved and valued as an employee.
Thank you so much. We have a lot of comments coming in, so thank you everyone for making this conversation really rich. We have some comments specifically about the engagement, the relationship part of the engagement, and one comment from Alexandru Duca, which is, if the greatest barrier to transformation is not technology but mindset, what must HR become to truly shift the collective consciousness of an organization? Are we still architects of policy or now curators of belief systems? And I love that comment. And our next question, as we all know, really speaks to that. For the folks in our audience who are HR professionals who are looking to up level from that tactical, execution-oriented HR role and into a more strategic, more relationship-based, more like holistic engagement-based place, what advice can you give them?
I'm happy to dive in. So one of the things I think about, and I've been speaking a lot about, is that I have accepted sort of as a responsibility of my leadership as a strategic, HR leader, to think of my role as much more than like what's on my job description, and what much more than what comes with like my day-to-day responsibilities. And so showing up in spaces like this, showing up as, a mentor and coach within and outside of my organization is one of the ways that, I think I have been leaning into, being a more strategic leader. The other thing is it's really important to become comfortable with and almost become a friend to data, to make sure that decisions are not just sort of made, in a bubble and aren't really informed by, what actually are we learning? What are the actual sort of facts around turnover? What can we learn? What can we learn even to be more anticipatory of what is going to be happening, like through predictive analytics? Are there like certain seasons over the course of, a given year when we tend to see, turnover, creep up, or, more exits or what have you? And so I think that becomes really important. I think being forward thinking and constantly, and I think this was spoken to earlier, constantly sort of like attuned to continuous learning, right, and development becomes really important. So I know for myself, we talk a lot about, what's going on in the world and artificial intelligence and ways to sort of level up, sort of all that we're doing. So being stuck in, a mind space of, what was cutting edge 5 years ago isn't, sort of conducive to, continuous growth and learning as a strategic HR leader. And, I think, beyond that, it's partnerships and relationships is becomes really important. And so I work in a nonprofit space. I work for an organization that has a lot of history, and I spend a lot of time outside of my space. And that only, expands my mind, my perspective. I also travel a lot. So that's another thing that expands my mind and my perspective. But, spending time with leaders that are outside of my industry is almost more helpful to me than at least as helpful, if not more helpful to me than, only connecting with folks in my network, that are in my specific industry. And so I think that becomes really important as well.
The one thing I'll add is tie in the employee value proposition with the career mobility. So if we're thinking of retaining employees, why? Why should employees want to be a part of the organization? And I did see some of the comments in the chat around the stay conversations. And I love the way you said that, Nicole, and the importance of those. And weaving into that conversation why we want employees to stay with the organization. What's the employee value proposition? And then from a succession planning standpoint and a career mobility standpoint, what does career growth look like? And how can employees ensure that they're continuing to learn and grow within the organization? And that does not always mean moving to the next level or taking your manager's role, but how can an employee expand within the organization and continue to learn and grow and add value to the organization? So having those conversations with employees really help with retention. And most important within that conversation is having honest, authentic, transparent conversations so that the employees and the leaders are on the same page as well.
For the HR professionals, I recommend shifting the perspective from seeing retention as individual tactics to understanding that it's a component of the larger long-term strategy. So while tactics like, bonuses or recognition programs, surveys, they're valuable, we need that, but they're only temporary solutions on their own. So the strategic approach, it begins with aligning that and directly linking it to engagement and, retention to business results. So it involves asking, what retains our talent, what might drive them away, and how can our leadership actions and people practices support our culture both at the year end and going forward. So I feel like HR professionals, we should aim to be thought partners rather than, merely those problem solvers. Like, whenever people think of HR, they tend to think of hire and fire, but that's not all we do. And some of us don't even do that. So leverage your data, understand the people dynamics and influence with leaders to connect those engagement efforts with performance, with well-being and retention. And so I feel like ultimately this approach, it shifts the focus from that tactical mindset to more strategic. That's helping the business view retention as, that key business priority instead of just an HR task.
Lauren, I know we're about at time. Do you mind if I just wrap up? Okay, I'll keep it short. But I feel like there's not much I can add because everybody's given some really great insight, but I'll give maybe one more additional perspective is sometimes in the HR seat, it also depends on the organization you're at on whether you truly can be strategic. You can really try all you might, and sometimes you hit a little bit of that blocker. And so it's so important knowing like your C-suite. Are they leaders that will really carve out a seat at the table for you? And so I think it's really important to find like that leader who's your champion, who can kind of help you move into that spot. But also don't just expect the leaders to carve out that seat at the table for you. You need to show up and show that you can be strategic and that you can be thinking. And so part of that is, Nicole, you already said data is so important. Show not just anecdotal information, but actual data that showcases why you're trying to push towards these certain initiatives. And really think about the leaders, think about what's important to them and not just what's important to HR. And a lot of times they're in line. So think about overall organization. What are the outcomes? What are the objectives, targets, and really shift that mindset from the more just kind of transactional, how do I get through HR initiatives? Switch it to outcomes focused. Think about the big picture.
Thank you so much. Panelists, you're all amazing. I hope everybody in our audience today connects with you and learns more from you. I will say our next panel is scenario planning for workforce agility and cost control. Thank you so much again, panelists. This has been amazing. Anselm, I know you've been backstage and we're so sorry you couldn't join us. Have an amazing day and enjoy the rest of the summit.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to day 3 of the summit. We're officially in our final stretch, but we're not still winding down just yet. I'm Sneha, your Chief Event Strategist here at Hacking HR, and will be your moderator for this panel. We'll be diving into the world of scenario planning for workforce agility and cost control for the next 45 minutes. I know it sounds like a financial meeting you'd really want to avoid on a Friday noon, but trust me, stick with us because this conversation is about the spreadsheets and numbers, and more than that, it's going to be more about making smart decisions about people and the future, staying flexible when things really change, because as we know that it's the world of AI and things are unpredictable, and making sure workforce planning supports people and not just the bottom line. And just to warm things up and warm up our brains, I would love for our audience to let us know what's one curveball your organization faced in the last year and how did your team adjust? Please do drop it in the chat, and we've all had it at least once in our lives, so we will make sure that we read that from your chats. All right, let's get into the panel. We've got two brilliant brains today with us today who've seen scenario planning from all different angles of strategy, culture, people analytics, and frontline operations. Okay, I see Manisha is having a glitch with the video, but I hope, yes, I hope she adjusts that. And yeah, as we kick off, please do introduce yourselves by sharing who you are, what you do, and what's one assumption about workforce planning that you believe we should totally throw out of the window. And let's start with Janet. Hey, Janet, we can't hear you. Could you maybe adjust the microphone? You're mute. You're mute right now. Okay, while, yeah,
Can you hear me?
perfect.
Okay, cool. Hi, thank you for having me in this panel today. I am Manisha Gupta. I am the Vice President of People Intelligence for Oracle and working for Oracle as well as for multiple companies of ours. So yeah, sorry, in the process, Neha, and the glitches, I forgot just introducing ourselves, or do you want?
Hey, Manisha, yes, we can absolutely hear you. Manisha, can you hear us?
I can. I think we have technology challenges going on all across, it seems like right now.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Yeah.
perfect. Perfect, and Chris. I think we could
Yeah.
hear
I
Janet
don't
as
know.
well.
The challenge, I think, when work,
Hey, Janet, we could hear you.
there's background noise from you, Janet. Maybe we need to. Okay, better. All right. Okay. So I think historically, workforce planning has been seen, as you said, Sneha, as a financial discipline, right? And normally it's done on Excels and it's primarily focused on like headcount and budgets. But if we really think about it today, skills, capabilities, competencies, that's become critical. When I say workforce planning, it's not just about headcount anymore. It's heavily about, do I have the right skills and the right capability for me to really plan the workforce so I can deliver the future outcomes. And I think that is super critical that as we think about workforce planning today and do the scenario modeling, it has to triangulate between the financial aspects, which is budgetary, also the headcount, but more importantly, the skills that we need today and in future to deliver the business outcomes. So when I look at scenario modeling, I see it more as a triangulation between business outcomes, financials, and skills slash headcount, but a lot about, do you have the right mix of right skills and is it evolving, especially as your initiatives are evolving. And you said it pretty perfectly. We're living in the world of AI. So future of work is evolving, future of skills is evolving. The mix of people that we will have with the right kind of skills, workforce is going agentic quite a bit today. So in fact, one of the scenarios we sometimes think of is also, should the scenario also account for which roles are best suited for humans and which are best suited for agents. But anyways, bottom line is, it's got to have this concept of skills-based planning and the regular evolution of how skills is evolving to do the new types of work that is coming up. So a lot more we should unpack in the next few minutes. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Manisha. That's incredible. And I apologize, everyone who's here with us right now, for the little technical glitches. Please bear with us for the next 40 minutes, and I hope it sets down by time. And we have Janet with us here. I think her microphone is working well right now. So, Janet, please introduce yourselves. Um, Tell us what you do, where you're from, and what's one assumption about workforce planning that you believe we should throw out of the window.
My name is Janet, of course. I'm with Central Arizona Shelter Services, and we have 3 homeless shelters in the Phoenix, Arizona area. And for workforce planning, I think an assumption that should be thrown out the window is not to include HR. We are able to be flexible with the finance department and have a seat at the table and provide a lot of valuable feedback of how to improve the organization and how it's running.
Thank you, Janet. That's amazing, but we could still hear a little bit of echo. So it would be great if we could just mute ourselves when we are not speaking so that we can try to cut down the glitches in between. And before we jump into the core details of this particular panel today, I would love to touch base on a couple of personalized questions where we could clearly learn about your own perspectives of how you deal things and how you take up those challenges and come together with the solutions. So I would go with Manisha first. From your perspective in people analytics, what data signals are most valuable in predicting future workforce needs and risks?
What's most valuable, Sneha, you're also cutting off a little bit. What's most valuable? Signals.
In predicting future workforce needs and risks.
Quite a few, honestly. I mean, the biggest risk we probably all, as I'll start with risk, the biggest risk is the data itself is not clean, right? So we have, some of us have data for I don't know, 10 years, maybe more, depending on how long the company has been running, some comparatively new, but immaterial for us to have good data. Predictions and anything AI always leans on data. And if the data is not structured well, if the data is not clean, your predictions are not going to be really trustworthy. Plus, the type of data I mean, and there's so many layers to it. What kind of data have you been collecting over the years? What kind of best practices have you had? Because whatever data I collect today, your AI can work based on that. And so it will start predicting a future which is based on your best practices that you had in shape today, right? So for example, if I'm doing performance evaluation and I'm only recording the ratings and not tracking the blurbs that people give, right? So now I can only predict based on very little data about I had 20% high performers, 80%, middle of the curve, etc. But if I'm also tracking a lot of the data about the sentiments that the manager had and the employee had and how they correlated and how they evolved, the patterns were initially we didn't have career pathing options, so I'm unhappy, or hey, I don't have learning, so I'm unhappy. I can't if I don't have the data, first of all, I can't do AI. If I have data but it's not clean, I can't do AI. If I have data, it is clean, but it was only around very limited set of people. Only India was collecting data, not Germany, or vice versa. Then obviously you'll have very biased data, and that bias could be in any flavor, depending on whatever the myopacity of collecting the data and cleaning the data has been. Right. So the biggest risk for us is the future that we intend to create is the data that we are leaning on for AI predictions. Is it able to help me answer the questions of the future, especially if I had not thought about them in the past, right? Because AI is a tool in the end. So I would say, knowing it's a biggest risk, we should always start with asking the right questions. And as intelligent humans, get and say, well, what kind of hypothesis am I expecting to get from this data when I'm predicting or applying AI? And then look at what AI suggested and try to understand, is there a gap? Because you as smart people likely were, expecting, well, we assume last year when we were low in compensation could have been a huge issue, or gap between employees and managers. But I think tomorrow, because we're fixing a lot of things, I'm hoping career growth could be. I'm just making this up, right? Some examples, or it could be, well, I believe maybe L&D could be a big gap, because most of the fee folks in our 101s are talking a lot about AI based trainings, and we haven't yet invested on that, right? So if you start with hypothesis and you start applying AI, you can see if there's a gap between what your AI is giving based on the data that you've given to it, or if it is representative enough. So that's the biggest risk. There are techniques we can apply. Obviously, the right kind of model and all that stuff obviously hold water, but even a gut check is important. Signals, I would say the more connected the world is, the better, because it's now, it's not just about HR, it's not just about finance, it's not just about like a specific department. Workforce modeling and planning is really getting the right folks on the seats to deliver the right outcomes at the right financial top and bottom line expectations. So it's a triangulation. And so I'm triangulating between business outcomes, financial outcomes, and people strategy. If you have data which is connecting a lot, first of all, from HCM itself has like 17, 18 modules. Have you connected all the data with all of them? So the signals could be benefits are not so good, learning is not so good, I have not been promoted for ages, help desk, my support system is pretty bad, I don't know, or very good, amazing, I stay back because my teams is such a wonderful chemistry that I just feel like I'm thriving in this team. Hey, they give me travel options and I'm growing because I love traveling globally. So the more signals you have, there's so many signals. I wish I could pinpoint on one particular signal. I think experience probably could be a pretty common one, where how is the overall experience or engagement of your employees? Because that's a signal which will say, well, if these people are going to stay long enough or perform long enough. And the whole workforce planning leans on, eventually the outcome is, I have high performers who are staying long enough, right? That's why I'm doing all this workforce planning. And their ability to shift their skill set and evolve their skill set with learning, which most of the high performers do. So maybe a generic signal, if you're looking for, somewhere is engagement, which leads to obviously the regular stuff of performance and retention. But really, to do proper workforce planning, the more connected data we have with all the HR systems, connected with financials, what was the spend we have last year? What is the spend we are expecting next year? Where is the spend going? Is it shifting in the way we are allocating resources across countries, BUs, across different job functions, across different skill sets? And obviously, then what is the business outcome that was delivered by this set of people last year? If I'm expecting them to deliver something else, do I have a good workforce planning scenarios and strategies such that the set shift, the budget shift, is justifying the outcomes shift? I think I'm going to
Thank
pass
you.
it on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And I think our audience have got their amazing piece of advice regarding the people analytics and also the data signals with both workforce needs and risks. And now jumping on to Janet, how do you help your teams prepare for multiple workforce scenarios without overwhelming them with what ifs? Janet, unmute your mic. Ah,
Okay, let's try that. So I really help my teams prepare for multiple workforce scenarios by helping them on giving them 2 or 3 scenarios and making sure that there's clear communication.
We hear a feedback. So I think there's an audio glitch. I would love for you to maybe make a quick tech check and jump in back to see if we can do better. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And yeah, I would love to throw a very interesting question between Janet can figure out the technical glitches and get back to us. This is for Manisha. So, as you know, we do have audience falling from all different ranges and all different industries right now within the summit. So, I just wanted to give an opportunity for everyone to understand. So, when you hear scenario planning, what's the first thing that pops into your mind? Let it be chaos, let it be spreadsheets, or maybe even an opportunity. What's the first thing that pops?
In my head, it's technology. And I know the past was a lot about Excels, but what if is scenario modeling, right? Like, what if I could do this? I mean, let's forget the tech world. What if I could have the best person on this in my team to deliver this amazing project that I'm dreaming of? Or um, what if the performance was rocket, they were very high? What if everybody's goals were aligned? So honestly, it's a tool you can dream with, because it is what ifing, whatever your dreams are. So Excel used to be a pretty common way of doing it. Honestly, I have in my 20 years back, I think it was over a cup of coffee, a couple of paper and pen, and heated and passionate debates with some people. So, but I think in the end, what pops in my head when I think of what if is the ability to pragmatically dream what you're what ifing, right? So the why matters the most, doesn't matter what the tech is. If the why is clear, I am what ifing how I can manage my spend. I am what ifing how I can get the highest performance. I am what ifing how can I create the best team structure. I am what ifing how can I make this team super effective as this team is. So what are you what ifing? Dream, pragmatic but big. And then the second thing of what ifing is, what are the levers you have? So what are you what ifing on, right? So I would love to what if on maybe managing your spend. You're talking about scenario planning for workforce agility. Okay, what if I could figure out a workforce plan which gives me the highest performers with the best skills I need and at very optimized cost? So now I have 3 different targets that I have to optimize for. It's a pretty complex what if. If I was only looking for what if I can manage my spend and get the right number of headcount. Spend is your what if, right? The first step, can I dream big? Can I scale it down to be pragmatic? What are the levers now that I could use to approach and get to that goal? So if I'm what ifing for, let's say, spend, I have a headcount budget for X. First, what kind of skills do you need from the headcount, right? So the skills, AI is a very expensive skill to acquire. Communication is somewhat in between, but data entry is cheaper. Okay, so you could have a lever to manage those. How much, what proportion could I get to achieve these dreams? You could ask AI also what would be the optimal proportion of these skills. Second, the lever could be recruiting. Do you really need to recruit, or can you up level some of the existing team members to achieve those skills? Third could actually be retention. Here you already have high performers who have these skills, and I think with a little bit of investment in them, they can up level themselves to achieve the future skills that you need. So again, I think what if, when I think of it, starts with what are we what ifing? What is the goal? How pragmatic is it vis-a-vis the culture in which we are living? Because certain companies may say, we don't offer global transfers. We don't ever want to look at attrition or the reorganization as a possibility. We always want to promote internal mobility. So you've got to be pragmatic about what are the levers you have, and then you start jamming. And I mean, I think what ifing is definitely fun individually, one-on-one. So you can create your own hypothesis, or I like plan A versus plan C. But then really it is about collaboration. And for especially for workforce planning scenario, a solid collaboration between finance, HR, and the operations leader yields the best results. Because eventually the operation leader has to run the organization, finance has to make sure there's enough money, and HR is the culture hub for the company. Yeah, I love this.
I agree with that. Thank you so much for sharing that effective detail with us. And we have Janet right now, so hopefully we are good with the technical glitches right now. And Janet, the stage is yours.
Perfect. So I was
Perfect.
just saying that I help my teams prepare for multiple different workforce scenarios by just focusing on clarity and prioritization and just giving them 2 or 3 scenarios instead of overwhelming them with multiple what if scenarios. And that really helps everyone from leadership and finance and HR understand what transitions are happening. As an example, we had a program closure, and when that came through, we focused on giving those staff options of where they could transfer instead of multiple scenarios of, well, maybe we could get this funding or this funding. And we really just focused on what could we do right now? What could the staff control? And what were those impacts on the people going to be? So it didn't matter if it was what the scheduling was going to look like, what we needed to communicate to the public. We wanted to focus on those employees, and we used the scenario planning in that way to make sure that we could focus on what do we know, what do we know, what do we need to know, what do we need to watch for, and how can we stay flexible. And I think a lot of cross-functional collaboration between the programs team, the leadership team, finance really helped us align those goals and make sure that people knew what was going on right away and were prepared for what was going to happen instead of going down a bunch of rabbit holes, because in the absence of information, we all know people just make assumptions.
Thank you, Janet. That is amazing. And as we have discussed on the brighter side, I would also love to hear your thoughts on what's one mistake or more, if you'd wanted to share, that organizations often make when cutting costs that actually hurt long-term workforce agility. And before you dive in, I would love for our audience to pop in any questions you'd have for Manisha and Janet in the chat. We will try to pick up a couple at the end of the panel.
Perfect. So I think one of the things that we should just be mindful of is to make sure that we include HR. We have a lot of feedback. We touch base with employees very frequently. We know what their goals are. We know how to help the managers. And we are always looking for the most manageable set of scenarios. And we can make sure that we have the tools and leadership support no matter what direction the organization is going in.
Thank you, Janet. Manisha, do you have something to add on to that? Or could we jump to the
I
next
think,
one?
yeah, we have shared. Collaboration definitely. Yeah, let's jump to the next one. I think I've kind of already added.
Okay, thank you. And I think we've touched down a bit on this particular one, but I would love for you to share more if you'd wanted to break down the internal details. So, what role does cross functional collaboration, which is the HR, finance, operations, play in effective workforce planning and cost control? And yeah, I'm happy for anyone to start with.
Janet, would you
So
like
I
to
think
start?
the role
Or?
of So I think the cross collaboration comes into play because you get a lot of people's feedback and information. While a lot of organizations try not to work in silos, there's a lot of information within human resources and they see things from a different lens, as well as finance. They're looking at things from a different lens, and the leadership team and the individuals who are in operations. So when you can come together, whether it's on a weekly basis or a big 20-minute Teams call, you can info dump before it affects the people who are working frontline with your customers. And so you can gather everyone's opinions. And when you have that cross functional relationship, you're able to say, hey, I wouldn't have thought of this point that finance brought up. We might have a grant that we know about that's $100,000, but finance is going to know how much we've been spending on it and what's been coming down the pipeline. And then programs will know, hey, yes, we might still have $50,000 on that, but we need to buy equity. And they're going to know that versus human resources who might be looking at, we have a lot of overtime and we need to bring in another staff member because we don't know maybe what those operational costs are going to be. And we don't know what the budget is that finance is looking at in real time as they're currently updating it. So that cross-functional collaboration gets everybody on the same page and gets us all working towards a goal with all the information up front.
Okay, should I add to it? Yeah.
Yes,
I
please.
think, yeah, just piggybacking on what Janet already shared. Um, in my mind, the story always starts with the operational leader who's responsible for delivering the outcomes, right? So, finance and HR both are pretty powerful functions, but in the end, it's about the general manager, head of sales, head of engineering, who has to deliver some outcomes. So, when it comes to workforce planning, I think equipping this person with all the information they need to have, and even education, oftentimes, especially education in today's world, because this has not been like a very practiced muscle in many organizations. And I think sales is probably leads the charter here, where they have had to forcibly, being very prudent about planning the next year's sales reps. What kind of reps do I need? Because what kind of products will I sell? What kind of sales quota do I have? But it starts with the operational leader who's responsible for delivering the outcomes, what they really need next year, right? Then obviously the story starts with, but today I have this, what is the delta between what you have and what you need? And that's where the finance and HR conversations kick in. If you need extra budget, obviously finance will have to be part of the conversation, because they're probably doing the same conversations with hundreds of leaders, tens of leaders, thousands of leaders. And in the end, they have to ensure if everybody is asking for even a 0.1% increase, it adds up for the organization, whatever the numbers are. So finance steps in to show them the past trends, the delivery of their organizations, how much budget they can practically allocate, and even maybe negotiations between across teams and what kind of budgets will be available for increasing the spend next year. HR, I think, is great from a perspective of offering the right policies and the right guidance. For example, somebody was talking to, they are such a strong culture of they never do reorgs, just never, no matter how problematic the situation is. They always will find whether it'll become like, let's partner with another company to deliver extra pieces, let's tap into seasonality. Like they will just brainstorm whatever it takes for them to figure out how they can make up if they are incurring, a dip in their bottom line. And that policy is reinforced obviously by HR. As for us as a place to work, we always do performance appraisals the right way. We always make sure maybe goals could be aligned. We make sure that people are engaged and giving their best, be transparent. So I like partnering with HR from that perspective. And I think HR plays a very critical role, which is beyond the numbers on the Excels and into understanding the human capital, which is our role on. Maybe you can make a shortcut today, but in the longer run, the talent brand is important, right? So you've got to send the right signals even in your workforce planning. So this quarter cut, eventually you'll need to hire those people back, as you get back on shape. So I think that the non-Excel and Excel, I'm not saying Excel, they definitely are partnering with them in terms of how they can. If suddenly a customer operation leader comes and says, I'm growing like X4 next year and I need to increase my workforce from 100 to 160, how are you going to manage onboarding these 60 people so that they have a good cohesive culture? Like, so HR will come up with, you need to have a buddy system. Make sure that you scatter them, don't hire all of them together. Interesting programs, creative ways of ensuring that the workforce that we hire is going to become productive, aligned with the rest of the workforce. So I think operations 100% business outcome driven, finance will be financial driven. HR then brings the triangulation of, it is in the end people, it's not nuts and bolts like supply chain. How do I onboard these people in a manner which is effective, healthy, positive experience for the people you onboard, as well as delivers the outcomes within the right financials. So that triangulation is super important for long-term sustainable growth, profitable growth of a company. And I like to say, when you're talking about profitable growth, the world talks about profitable growth. Finance obviously always talks about it. But what is sustainable profitable growth? If I let go of people or if I don't take care of them today, and so tomorrow they're not engaged or tomorrow they leave, sustainability is out, right? So sustainable profitable growth is when you're focusing on the people whom you're leaning on to deliver the outcomes, obviously focusing on growth and focusing on profitability with finance, but doing it in a sustainable manner that you're growing your people while growing your business. Then the engine continues to thrive together. So that's why the collaboration is like very, very critical.
Thank you so much. Amazing, ladies. So I think I totally agree with both of you. As you've mentioned that, yes, the cross-functional collaborations really sounds like the backbone for the smart planning of finance, HR, operations, and trying to pull together all in the same direction. But even with everything that's happening on board, things can sometimes get a little bit messier. So I would also love to touch base on how to keep it simple. So, how do you make sure scenario planning stays agile and flexible without becoming too complex for most of the leaders to actually use it at the moment?
I think the best thing we can do is stick to 3 maybe clear scenarios and pair them with decision triggers. If X is going to happen, what are we going to do? If Y happens, this is where we're going to go, and this is the communication that's going to go out. If we give that clarity, it makes agility really actionable and it gets everyone on the same page and we're well prepared.
Spot on. I think sometimes when so what we could achieve with a paper napkin on a Starbucks coffee shop, sometimes we forget to achieve with Excels and technology, right? Because we love playing with complexity. 20% reduction in force and 5% in recruiting. Like, no, it's give me a very simple. I need to manage my spend next year. Maybe postpone all the requisitions by 3 months and you can get 80% of that goal. And that's a great enough policy. Simple, done, right? So I love the way, Janet, you said, I don't need 20 super complex scenarios. Look at the biggest drivers that might be most effective in your organization and just say, what if I only pull one lever? What if I only, let's say, pull the lever of maybe overtime is going to be capped, maybe travel will be stopped for some time. And then maybe look at some combination for some, like as a third potential example, but keep it simple, keep it actionable, keep it deployable at all levels by all managers. And don't use technology to to make things better. Don't use technology to make things more complex, which we sometimes tend to do.
Amazing. Absolutely. I love that. And you are right on the point. And I would also add up with another question followed by that. Um, So you know that keeping things agile and not overly complex is the right key with all the conversation that happened right now. But even with the best plans, we can always fall flat if employees feel left out in the loop. So if building on to that, how do you bring employees along within this process? So workforce planning doesn't feel like it's happening just behind closed doors.
I think a lot of it. Can you hear me okay? I think. Can you hear me okay? Okay. I think a lot of it boils down to how managers work with their employees, right? So, I mean, every 101, these conversations of, our teams are expanding or business is expanding, how do we need to think about the future? I mean, you can like literally workforce planning in the end has to happen somewhere at the aggregate level because the whole company has to keep an eye on the financials. But it could pretty much be like a somewhat transparent, if not 100%, because it's going to be repetitive and iterative. But let's say, like, you have a leader running a team of 100 people and 7 managers. Every conversation with every manager, how is the future of the company shifting? What kind of needs do we have? I'm going to bring it up to my leader. So this conversations, everybody knows that, our needs will be heard. And you bring it up at the top level, some level workforce planning gets done, and then the results of that gets disseminated. This is what the modeling for next year looks like. Again, you explain, we got exactly what we had asked for, or we did not get what we asked for because of ABC reasons. And as long as there's transparencies within a small team, right, manager and employee, and also across the peers, it has happened sometimes when my colleagues would say, Manisha, I think for your product, for your team, you need a little bit more. So, we'll give you some of our headcount this year because this needs to grow, or vice versa. But the crux is trust, Sneha. Crux is transparency and trust. And if it is happening at every conversation level, bottoms up and then top down, employees do feel a part of it. They will likely not. It's not going to practically scale to have 100% transparency 100% of the times with 100% of the people. Just not practically possible. But just the notion of I am heard and I understand why I did not get what I did not get, or I got what I got. And over a period of time, I think that just starts feeling a little bit better.
Thank you, Manisha. And do you have something to add on to that?
I think for CAS, we really focus on communicating early and openly and just saying, this is what's happening. Maybe there is a budget cut and this is why we're taking these steps. But we really focus on training our staff and letting them know this is when we are going to talk about certain things. Here's our quarterly meetings. And that training is basically setting expectations and then making sure that they're aware of this is why we make the decisions we make and how we can make sure that they know that all the decisions aren't being made behind those closed doors. But mostly it's that communication that's open and transparent.
Thank you, Janet. I do have a lot of different topics and discussions that we can still go over, but we are right at time. So I would love to close it with a very quick lightning round. So I would be popping out 2 questions where we would be closing the panel, but I would love to have your perspectives of what you think about them. If you could leave HR leaders with one tip for marketing scenario planning, a true driver of agility, not just cost cutting, what would it be?
Sustainable, profitable growth. If you want to get it year after year, you have to think of the people angle. And I would say it's about HR. Sorry, it's about HR. So I would say be assertive.
I would second that. Always anchor it in the people. The numbers tell you what's possible, but the people tell you what's sustainable and what can really happen in the organization.
Thank you, Janet. And the next one would be looking ahead. What's one thing you think organizations will need to unlearn about workforce planning in order to stay truly agile?
Okay, it's not just about finances, and it's not just about executives. Today, knowledge workers are all at all levels, so transparency is key. and connectedness is key.
Yes, and I think with agility, if you don't have trust, it just turns into chaos. So the staff need to trust you. You need to have that open communication, and the employees need to believe that you're planning with them in mind and they'll move through any scenario with you and run through walls.
Thank you, Manisha. Thank you, Janet. I really appreciate your time and for sharing your perspectives on this topic that's really often treated just like the numbers, as we all know. And to our audience, thank you for sticking around, for adding your perspectives in the comment box, and for being here as we head into the final lap of our summit. So I would request everyone to go grab some water, stretch a little, and our dear friend Daniel will take over the next panel shortly. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Welcome, everyone, to day 3 of Business and HR Strategy and Budget Planning Summit. We're so glad that you're here with us today, and I can't wait to get this panel started. My name is Danielle LePage, and I'm Hacking HR's Chief Learning Officer, and I'll be your moderator today for our conversation. Quick question before we dive in. Have you had a chance to review the Summit workbook yet? If not, one of my colleagues will share the link with you in the chat so you can access it and follow along with it. All right, so now let's talk about today's panel. Our topic is communicating budget and strategic decisions across stakeholders. And we brought together a fantastic group of experts from around the world to share their insights with you. Jessa, will you kindly bring our panelists to the stage? Hello, ladies. How are we today?
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
You're doing good?
Yes, how are you?
Well. I'm doing good, thank you. Nice to see your faces this morning. And I think we should do a round of introductions to get us warmed up. Maybe you could tell us who you are, what you do, and where you're from. We would love to know. I'll hand it over to you, Yolanda.
Wonderful, thank you. My name is Yolanda Hutchins. I'm the Chief People Officer at PCORI, which is a funder of patient-centered comparative clinical effectiveness research, or CER, and I'm located in DC.
Wonderful, thank you. And over to you, Anna.
Hi, everyone. I sit in an organization that translates artificial intelligence in action, and that's what I do, for life. For sustaining my income, I really want to help all organizations translate their business strategy to the organization and people capabilities with the help of technology, and specifically the newest technology right now, generative AI. I'm here in the Silicon Valley trying really very much to catch up with the exponential developments that are happening.
Thank you, Anna. Nice to see you again. And is it Waveney? Is that how I pronounce it? Okay, great. Over to you.
Yes. Hi, good morning. I'm Waveney Bell. I'm an HR executive with Executive Edge. I spent majority of my career in human resources in the financial services industry. And prior to that, I spent quite a bit of time in IT and business project management and risk management. So this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. I spent lots of time in the budget planning and strategic decisioning and communication space. So look forward to being with the panel this morning.
Thank you. Nice to have you here, Waveney. And over to you, and I hope I'm pronouncing it okay, Liseth.
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you.
Oh, great.
Hi, everyone. My name is Liseth Subi. I'm the Chief HR Officer for a nonprofit based here in Los Angeles called Child Care Resource Center. I've been in HR for 25 years and worked in hospitality prior to being in the nonprofit world. So happy to be here.
Nice to meet you, Liseth. Thank you, ladies, for the intros. All right, we're going to get started first with just a general warm-up question, all right, to get the wheels turning. Why do budget and strategy discussions often become defining moments for leaders within an organization?
Sure, I don't mind starting. I think it's such a defining moment because it's such a culmination of all the strategic planning and work that the team does in order to get ready for the next year. And so the ability to, have a clear plan that's, approved and ready to be communicated can really make or break the upcoming year in terms of an organization being able to achieve its goals and competitive advantage. And it really solidifies how the team starts off, how they're working together to drive organizational impact.
And I would like to add to that during this process, they definitely really are forced to make visible trade-offs. Leaders are forced to make trade-offs between competing priorities. And people watch not just what the decisions are, but also how they were made. Was there transparency? Were they fair? Were they aligned with the values of the company? And all these decisive moments really reveal a lot of things about the character. So
I like that. Anyone to add?
Yeah, I would just add that I think it's when you really see what the priorities are, because essentially you're trying to, I think as Waverly shared, you're trying to make sure that you've got the resources, the money, right, to support whatever it is that you're trying to do. And so sometimes you can come to the table with a whole host of things that you say are priorities, but then when you have to align the resources and the money, right, that you have allocated to those, then you start, kind of figuring out what really are the things that I must do, that I absolutely need to do, and that I'm willing to spend the money on and doing it this next fiscal year.
Right on. Thank you, ladies, for that. Next up, we're going to discuss some personalized questions that we have. And then following that, we've got some core questions for anyone to jump in on and carry the conversation. So we're just going to start off here. Yolanda, how do you communicate decisions and get stakeholder acceptance and adoption, especially when the decision is a difficult one?
Well, thank you for that. Of course, I'll start before going into, just some of the things that, we do or I've done and recommendations. You have to know your client, right? You have to know the culture of your organization. You have to know, have a sense of what, might be an issue versus not. But aside from that, one of the things that you want to do is, as possible, start early partnering with finance or the COO, CEO to understand the direction that they'd like the budget to go in. Also connect with your stakeholders. This is outside. I'm sure, you're having one-on-ones with your stakeholders, your clients, to understand what their priorities are for the next fiscal year, what their budget needs are, what their strategic plans are. And the purpose of doing this is to give you insight into what might be challenges based on the information you're getting from the other side, right, regarding the budget and the strategic plan and the direction of it. And that insight can help inform and prepare you for what kind of key takeaways or what key information do you want to have included in that communication, and what sort of potential concerns might be out there that you also want to sort of get in front of in that communication. The third thing is what could be helpful is to develop a guide with a few ways that stakeholders can minimize the pinch, if there is one, to help them still achieve their goals or their priorities. And what I mean by guide, but some guidance around, options, if we're talking about the budget and the strategic plan being something that will impact headcount. What other options do you have outside of FTEs that can still help you, right, and provide you resources to get done what it is that you want to get done? Another example could be if the issue is, maybe a decrease in non-personnel spending, then again, if we're talking about consultants or other vendors or what have you, what other ways, right, can you still get what you normally would get from those individuals in a different way? Look at timing. If you've got agreements with these consultants that is mid-year, then maybe that mid-year it's already paid for this fiscal year, right? So it'll get you through half of the next fiscal year. And then it's just a matter of maybe coming up with some sort of negotiation with that vendor to, renegotiate certain services, et cetera, that will help you meet the budget requirements or needs for that next fiscal year. So those are some things that we've put in place, I've seen put in place that, has been pretty helpful in communicating budget and or strategic information to stakeholders, and especially when that budget or strategic information and or guidance is one that is, sort of challenging or may be seen as challenging by the stakeholders.
Excellent examples. Excellent. Does anyone have any thoughts on what Yolanda was discussing? they want to share? All right, we're going to move on to the next question, which is for Waveney. What's one technique you found effective in building alignment when different stakeholders have competing priorities? Oh, you're on mute, by the way.
Thank you. Sorry for that. As we know, that's something that happens often. You hope that before you even get into the budget planning that you've been able to, vet out, those types of, concerns or discrepancies, as it were. But it's bound to happen. It'll always happen that, there's something that we need to make sure that we have alignment on. Maybe it could be the timing of something that's requested as a line item, or it could be, in some cases, a new entry in a line item that's just not going to be, effective for the organization. But whatever it is, it's what I always find helpful is bringing the groups together to talk about what is our common goal, what is the problem that we're trying to solve to, and how do we do that together. And in some cases, it could be, modeling the impacts of those two different priorities, as we were, and helping the team to understand how we can either time it, how can we, win together, and by reframing the question about whether or not something should be pursued is how do we holistically meet the goals together. Whether that could be, whether it's an example of a project and, we need to have something in by a certain time, but yet maybe we don't have all the right surrounding parts of the ecosystem that are ready to go at that time as well. And just making sure we are pacing the decisions we make that can continue to help the organization to succeed. So it's bringing the teams together to make sure that we understand what are the goals that we're trying to accomplish and how do we either pace or align so that we can win together.
Great, thank you. All right, our next question is for Liseth. As a CHRO, what's one practice you use to make budget and strategy conversations more people-focused and less numbers-heavy?
Thank you. I think it's really important that, we don't jump straight into the costs, but rather start with asking the why behind the numbers, understanding how that budget line will impact the people. Is it going to impact the engagement, retention, productivity, or, the culture? So for example, if we're saying we're going to spend $100,000 on a leadership program, it's understanding and leading with, why is that investment important? How is this going to help us strengthen our leadership, grow the talent pipeline internally, support, career pathways for our associates? So by tying the numbers to tangible human outcomes, regardless of whether it's productivity, reduced turnover, creating stronger succession plans, it really helps to shift the conversation from an expense to an impact. And it also helps to, bring the alignment with the business leaders and looking at it from the lens of, the performance, the outcomes, what we expect from our people, who are ultimately also going to be responsible for executing this budget. So it's a subtle shift in understanding the why and the people impact to that cost implication.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Liseth. All right, Anna, how do you bring in emerging technologies like AI to help simplify or clarify complex budget communications across stakeholders?
Thank you for saying that. AI is so valuable into that. First of all, because it makes complexity much more digestible. With role-specific dashboards and predictive models, we can simplify data into what matters most for each and every one of the stakeholders. In such a way, it can help us not only to do the budget better, but also communicate it better afterwards, because we can specify the message for each of the stakeholders. I was at a manufacturing firm implementing AI, and in that case, we utilized AI dashboards And we utilize them in order to translate what has been budgeted for the next year and how this budget was translated into simple workforce impacts, like the training hours funded, also the specific skills that would have been prioritized. And we made a DISync dashboard act in order to show how each of the department organization was impacted by the new budget. It was also something that we could utilize afterwards in order to showcase to the employees and relate instantly about the investment that was being made.
Thank you, Anna. Does anyone have any comments or thoughts about that one they'd like to share?
I think it's going to be really interesting how the AI technology will help us to simplify some of the complexities in understanding the data. And obviously, this is going to vary by organization to organization. But I think we need to look at it from the lens of how can we be more productive and effective in understanding the data and using the technology to help us break that in simple ways.
Well said. I agree. All righty, we're going to move on to some core questions.
Can I?
Yep.
I mean, Danielle, I would like to plug in something. I mean, just 3 sentences about HR and how its role is very much changing, as well as the department of HR within organizations. So right now, it's very much understood, and it will be much more, that it doesn't matter who knows more, but it does matter who understands how things can be better done, and is curious enough to find out the way to do it. And that is a way that HR department as a whole should be thinking. It doesn't matter if I know very well the employment law. It doesn't really matter if I know things. It does matter, though, if I am curious enough to know how I can implement the strategy. I just wanted to, yeah.
Very well put. All right. We're going to move on with some core questions for everyone. So feel free to jump in. We'll get the discussion going. So the first one I have here is, why is a strong HR and finance partnership so important to implementing a comprehensive budget?
Yeah, I will. I'll jump in here first. You know, I can say that I am lucky enough to have a really, really strong partnership with the CFO. And I think as a result, we were able to create a strong, budget plan that was comprehensive and really covered all things that would need to be covered within a budget. And in doing so, we were able to, build out and include, whether it was a site that folks could go to, right, as they are needing to update and make changes to their budget, procurement information all in the same place, personnel information all in the same place, requests for headcount, promotions, et cetera, all in the same place. What it allowed, at least from a client experience perspective, is our stakeholders could go to one place and really be able to understand all of the different components, see all of the different components, and be able to address all of the different components within the budget. And I don't think that we would have been able to successfully do that had we not had, or had there not been a strong partnership between myself as the CPO and the CFO of the organization. Now, that's not to say that there aren't things that every year that we implement this that we find that we want to do differently or better, or make enhancements to for the sake of the client experience. But, the conversations, the gatherings, the multiple presentations, us, being on the same page, making sure that we have, all of the pieces covered. I think that is a result of the partnership between the CFO and the CPO. And I think our clients have benefited from it.
I just think I'll ask the audience to jump in here on the chat. How do you go about building a strong partnership between HR and finance? I'd love to see some of your techniques in how you go about doing that. So I'll just put that out there. Next question is, how do we simplify complex financial and strategic information for non-experts?
I think part of that is really creating the transparency and understanding the context, right? Framing the context as to, again, I think explaining the why, what are the trade-offs, and this also helps to sort of support managing the change. And also, I think the second point is using a tiered communication approach, looking at who is your audience, how much information do they need, identifying those talking points of potential, common questions or guidance. But I think, anticipating who your audience who your audience is, what those needs are going to be, will help you to determine how you want to explain that. And then, give people the opportunity to ask those questions, get their inputs, concerns, or just maybe even recommendations. And this could come in different formats, whether it's one-on-ones or surveys or in group sessions or focus groups. But I think also giving them the opportunity to be part of the process, again, to a certain extent, depending on the level, will help to sort of disseminate the information and also make it more understandable to those individuals.
I like that. Asking them, how do you want to digest this type of information? Yeah, that's great. Here's another question. How do you build muscle around strategic planning and decision making? Part 2 of the question is, how do you adjust your communication style when presenting budget decisions to executives versus employees?
Well, I want to echo what Lizette was saying about your audience and just making sure that whenever we, go to market with the information, that it's tailored to the audience. And, it's so important that, regardless if it's, someone who is at the very, beginning of the value chain or towards the end, is that they understand and feel, their impact, in the space, and that we, communicate to them in terms of, and visually always helps in terms of how they actually show up, impact, and contribute to the success of the organization. And it should be something that should be an ongoing routine, not just during this particular season, but throughout the year, that we're having these open conversations and we're having these strong relationships with our finance partners and our IT partners, because conditions change, budgets will change. And so as long as we have those open, relationships and communications there, you've built the credibility that folks will trust and understand the whys behind the path that the organization needs to take, and the input and the innovation that they can bring in overcoming any of those challenges that come up along the way.
That's right. That's why it's so important to drip those opportunities, even if they're small, leading up to those bigger ones. Drip opportunities to build trust with your people.
Absolutely. It's not one and done. We'll never communicate anything once. It has to be an ongoing communication plan. Well said.
And then I think the second part to your question was, how do you differentiate communication from your executive to your other staff, right? And look, I think from the executive level, we look at it as a whole organization, right? And you take deeper dives into maybe more complex financial information, what is happening that's impacting the overall organization. And then when you tailor it to other groups, not at the executive level, I think this goes back to, defining what that level is, what they are responsible for, also having an understanding of what may be their background and understanding the financials, and tailoring that communication, and also I think, some people are more visual. Some people, again, they might want to see graphs, or they just want to see the numbers, or again, relating it to how it's going to impact directly, their business outcomes. So I think executive is high level, and then lower positions, you kind of tailor it in more digestible ways so that they can understand and relate to the data.
Yeah, and the thing that I would add quickly is, where you can, I think using scenarios or something that connects directly with the work that they do, with the decision that's being made, can be helpful as well. Because I think part of the question was about not only communicating, but, sort of helping them understand, right, that are not necessarily financial experts or strategic experts. And so connecting it to what they do, and then showing through that scenario how it will impact them, or how it may impact them, or why, it's important, or, the decision has been made, can also help make that connection and link and help develop understanding.
And if I may add here, your question on building planning muscle within the corporation means very much on how you design things to happen. It's about really creating consistent rituals within the organization, how you create a cross-functional practice. And you can do that. I mean, there are a lot of AI ways to do that, that help you very much create stress test scenarios. So all these, when built, it helps creating repetition and real life competence on having this strategic planning muscle required within the company. And I want to give an example to showcase what I'm talking about. So at the global firm, what we have done, we have introduced quarterly what-if workshops. We have making AI forecasts in order to help leaders practice responding to a disruption. And that was being done quarterly, and it became a muscle memory. What if this happens? Okay, we're going to do this, move things around. And this was helping really develop an internal strategic planning competence in real life.
Mm-hmm.
Danielle,
I think that's awesome. Go ahead, Waveney.
Thank you. One thing I wanted to add, particularly when it comes to communicating with executives, particularly executives who are stakeholders in the process once it started and during. And it's so important. Timing is everything, that we are constantly keeping executives informed along the way as decisions and discussions are happening, as opposed to inputs are made, discussions are happening, and then now we're giving them, here's the final decision. It's so important for leaders, especially, to be part of the process that drives, greater ownership, understanding, and the ability to execute on that plan, once it's, finalized. And so just wanting to stress how important it is to have that communication openly throughout the process, because it also helps you as you're in the process to get any new insights and information that will help to build out a holistic and successful budget.
Yep. Well put. Yes, it is important. All righty. Let's lead into the next question here. We've touched on a little bit, but what are some practical ways to create transparency around difficult financial decisions without overwhelming people with too much detail?
I would like to say something which is coming out of a wonderful experience. I would like to say that it is important, in order to preserve the transparency without the overload, to make sure that you use layers for the level of communication. Not only for the layer of communication to the different hierarchy levels, but also to the extent of details. You can utilize broad messages for all, and detailed data can be available, but not forced to the people. People can go deeper if they choose to. I had experienced a huge merger of two humongous European airlines. I'm not going to say the names, but I mean, you probably know that, huge airlines. And a lot of communication was needed because of trade unions a little bit objecting to the whole thing. So it was a turbulent merger. Yet, despite the need to communicate, to many different directions and to a great detail in this merger, what has been done, everyone was given a one-page overview of the information, all the stakeholders involved into that. But yet, at the same time, they were provided a 30-page appendix for those that they wanted details. And in that way, the balance was preserved for all the needs. And that is probably somehow a way to go about it, layering the level of the depth.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yes.
Yeah.
All righty, we're going to move into the next, just keeping an eye on the time here. Let me see. How do you keep communication consistent across different channels, town halls, manager cascades, written updates when sharing budget outcomes?
I don't mind starting. I would share this with one other friend at work comes in, and that's your communications team, and being sure that you have clear, consistent communication that can be used by different levels of management and also employees, so that they're hearing the same message. We talked about it earlier, dripping that message along. And I think having a holistic, easy to find, using the same language where it makes sense, just so that you have that information readily available and it's stored someplace where everyone can go back and refer back to it, so that we are having a unified message. That's what I found has worked the most. And then you maintain and monitor that messaging, but there should be clear, concise message. What clarity is kind, right? So we want to be sure that it's clear, it's not overwhelming, it's not filled with jargon, but it's really explaining that the messages and what we're trying to accomplish. And it always should ladder back to what are the strategic priorities of the organization.
I find it so easy that some companies lose sight of the importance of that communication and also preparing leadership, management on the consistent messaging, because we know our employees are going to come to them with questions, and we all have to have that consistent message. And I find it's easy to lose sight of sometimes. So thanks for bringing that to light.
Yeah, I was going to say talking points, right? And sometimes you have to spoon feed what talking points are for executives, right? For leadership, for staff, so that not only are they getting the same message, but the leaders kind of know, okay, so this is the information that I need to share at this level versus this is the information that I need to share at this next level. And again, it just contributes to the consistency of the messaging and the audience in which the message is given. So agree with everything that Waverly were saying.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, for me, it's also the aligning of the timing across all the communication channels, right? So working cross-functionally to make sure that the communication rolls out in a coordinated way, especially if it's some difficult information that you need to share, because that would also build that trust and reduce confusion about information. And then closing the loop, especially if something needs further clarification or reinforcement is important. And that will vary again by the organization.
How do you create space for a two-way dialogue so stakeholders feel heard even if the decision doesn't go their way? How do you do that?
I can take that, which is a tough one, I guess. So it's not always easy, because decisions might be very much unpleasant to the people. And people might not have the ability to change these decisions. But by creating the space for dialogue, they at least feel heard. So that's why, although we might feel that there is no reason to do it, finally, there is. So by creating, for example, the manager cascades that we're talking about with consistent messaging, creating open forums that people can really go there and express their opinion, create digital channels that people can really go there and write down how they feel, what they feel about these things. That is important. Creating anonymous boards alongside your town halls. Also, leaders in such a way can understand what are the areas that matter most, and they can address them, even the hard ones. It is much better, really, to see what's going on than really hiding your head within the sand.
Great point there. I was going to add, also, I think in organizations that, use adaptive planning, you tend to have that ongoing dialogue, but in cases where that process doesn't exist, it's, the communication happening again throughout the process, from the pre-planning, having functional, heads or champions for each of the areas that are having their own meetings within their functions to gather information, gather insights, and also that they're encouraging that dialogue during the planning process, being sure that there's two-way communication that's happening about, requesting additional information or, letting people know what the tone of the conversation is, how it's happening along the way. And then once we get to the decision, going again to the town halls, like Anna said, having those open conversations where employees and leaders can ask questions and being prepared to give them the clear answers as to why, and just preparing along the way for that is so critical.
Does anyone have a lesson that they've learned personally from the past budget cycles that has changed the way that you approach communication and alignment today?
I think for me, it's been, preparation and understanding sort of how the business is and anticipating some of the changes that are forthcoming with the business. That way, as you go into your budget season, coming in prepared with those questions and understanding where things might shift so that you can start anticipating what changes you might need to implement.
Yeah, one of the lessons that we've learned is, really leveraging our relationships with the stakeholders and the meetings, right, that we have with them to gather information. As a result of those meetings and as a result of the relationships, we've been able to enhance certain aspects of the process because we heard and incorporated their feedback, right, around it. So maybe it's not necessarily going to impact the decision that's made, but it can at least improve or help their experience, right, in implementing whatever the decision is. So that's one of the things that we've, learned and have tried to implement or incorporate, and it's been beneficial.
Thank you for sharing, Yolanda. And with just a couple of minutes left, if you could give HR pros and business leaders one tip to improve stakeholder communication during tough budget cycles, what would it be? Would love to hear.
I can go on. I would like to give a very, very clear message. And that clear message is about clarity. Clarity with empathy beats complexity every time. A clear human message travels further than a perfect communication or budgeting model.
I think for me, it's understanding the why and what is the people impact to the financial changes. Because there is a direct correlation between those changes that you do and the output from the people, the human capital side.
I'd say similar to that, having unified messaging and partnering together and, being open and clear and consistent.
Yeah, and I would end with what, the answer that I gave on the previous question, making sure that you're connected with your stakeholders so that you have that information so that whatever the decision is, you can provide the CEO, the COO with some of the potential concerns, right? Some of the potential issues. And that will help not only them as they inform their decisions around budget, et cetera, but it will also help inform the communication and the approach that you might use in communicating what those budget and strategic decisions are.
Thank you all for participating in today's panel. Thank you, Waveney. Thank you, Yolanda. Thank you, Lisette. And thank you, Anna, for being here today. And our next panel is called Preparing for 2026, Strategic Road Mapping and Talent Acquisition. All right. We will see you next time, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
everyone, and good whatever moment of this wonderful day you are enjoying on your time zones as you are watching us, or you will listen to us later on enjoying the recording. And I hope you've been taking lots and lots and lots of notes throughout these past 3 days. And I know I have. And I've been enjoying every single conversation. And even more so, I enjoyed the energy and the insights coming through all the wonderful chats and comments from our audience. We have about 40 minutes to talk about preparing for 2026, and we will be discussing all the ins and outs of strategic road mapping and talent allocation. Now, I will ask Jessa to help me make the most of our time by bringing up our speakers. And as they settle into their Zoom boxes, I will ask everybody to continue the great energy in the chat, and do consider this conversation open for you just as much as it is open for our panelists. And it's always a great way of supporting the community to continuously learn by sharing your own opinions, your own stories, your own questions and tips and tricks. Why not? So I would really love to start our conversation with a short intro round. And just for changing things up a little bit, I will start this conversation going counterclockwise as you are on my screen, which means, Carol, you will go first. And, just a short introduction of yourselves. And as you are going through the planning for 2026, or you are just about to go into the preparation for 2026, I am super curious, what is the loudest thing on your mind as you go through this process, or you look to kickstart this process? Carol, always a joy to see you. Welcome.
Thank you, Manola. Great to see you as well. And I'm excited to be in such great esteemed company with my fellow panelists today. My name is Carol Cooley, and I'm a fractional chief HR officer. And I'm based in Denver, Colorado. And I've been in human resources for probably 25 years. So I've seen a lot of things in my time. And I think one of the biggest things that are on my mind going into 2026 is continued uncertainty, right? So there's a lot of instability in markets. There's a lot of talk about recession. There's a lot of talk about tariffs. There's a lot of talk about political instability. So I think the thing that's on my mind is how to do contingency planning in the midst of uncertainty and a variety of scenarios that might manifest.
Thank you so much. Lynn, good to have you with us. I don't know if it's just me, but your audio is not coming through. Let's try again.
Is it better now?
Welcome.
Hello. Sorry about that. I should have tested it beforehand. I was trying to multitask all of the things. So hi, everyone. Lynn Hubert, Chief Human Resource Officer for Unimed, which provides medical and pharmaceutical supplies to the maritime industry. I've been in human resources almost as long as Carol has been, so about 28 years to be exact. And so definitely some of the things that I think in planning for 2026 is change management, right? And agility, being ready for organizational shifts and risk management as well.
Thank you. Anju, good to see you.
Hi, Minola. Thank you. Really happy to be here with this group. Hi, everybody. My name's Anju Chaudhary, and I'm the Chief People Officer for Zozo Day. We are a reward recognition company trying to make every day rewarding and keeping up the motivation and productivity high for organizations. As we think about 2026, what's top of mind for me is how we align talent, technology, and culture for business growth in rapidly shifting market. We spoke about tariffs, uncertainty, how skills over roles is changing, human-centered design workforce, and then budget and foresight. So I'm so glad that we'll have an opportunity to speak about it. My priority is ensuring a people strategy, which is forward-looking for our business, and we are able to remove any bottlenecks for growth and create an accelerator.
Thank you. Kamisha, thank you for being here. You're making our panel complete.
Thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. My name is Kamisha Kwong, and this is my first time being a panelist, so be gentle with me. Thank you. I am the head of people at Copilot AI. It's a local Vancouver AI startup. I am based in Vancouver, BC, Canada. Not to be confused with Microsoft Copilot. Copilot AI, we were the first one to file for a trademark of the name Copilot because now there's so many. But we just do AI-powered tools for B2B sales teams to increase efficiency and conversion. So just making outbound as simple as inbound. And I think for me, top of mind working in the AI space is the emergence of agentic AI. Like my fellow panelists here have talked about change management and uncertainty. I think for us as HR folks, we can leverage agentic AI in a way to streamline our workflows and scale impact beyond what's humanly possible. So that's a really exciting thing for me going into 2026.
Wonderful. Now, I do promise that I will not let too much time pass before we come back and we pick up the topic of technology and AI. I know there's a lot of energy around this topic. But before we get there in a few minutes, I would like to create a bit of space. Almost without exception, the conversations across this summit touched sooner or later on scenario planning. And I would really love to hear your views on how do you harness the power of scenario planning in your preparing for 2026 with a spin for extra points. I'm also curious, what is one capability or one skill that you recommend for our fellow HR practitioners to develop to make the best value out of scenario planning? And ice cream on me when we next meet in person, if that skill is outside the circle of the usual suspects. So this was a long question, not what they taught me in journalism school, but please bear with me. So scenario planning, how do you use it? And what is one skill that you encourage people to really develop to make the most of scenario planning? And this will be a unmuting competition rehearsal round. So just pop up as inspiration strikes. And one at a time, just one at a time, so we can.
All right.
hear all of you.
Everyone's speaking at the same time. I'll go first. I think for scenario planning, so we talked a little bit about change management and uncertainty. So that's the whole thing with scenario planning and workforce allocation. For me, when I approach it, I think about creating base, downside, and upside cases with clear workforce triggers. So for example, like a really generic one, let's say your revenue flatlines, then we know which roles will freeze for hiring. If growth spikes again, then we've already pre-identified a talent pipeline, something even a different unusual talent pipeline, perhaps nearshoring a contractor pipeline instead of the usual suspect that you're looking at. And then I think that for our role, HR, is to try to find flexibility in the talent supply. So not just thinking about headcount planning in the usual sense, but then finding unconventional ways to workforce plan. And then, sorry, Manolo, what was the last question? The skill bit?
Yeah, that was just recommend one skill that our HR practitioner fellows can develop, maybe something that they haven't necessarily thought about.
Yeah. I like to touch upon prompt engineering. That's a really cool thing that's coming about more with the AI craze. AI is constantly innovating at a pace that we can barely even keep up with. Like what tools that we have available today is so light years ahead of what we had last year or even last month. So I think prompt engineering is the task. It's a skill that's being refined in how to effectively give certain prompts to language learning models, LLMs, to generate a certain outcome or output. And I think that once you harness that skill, like for even not just engineers, not just HR folks, but like let's say across the spectrum of functions like engineering, it'll transform the traditional sense of, let's say, engineering, so that all different roles have that prompt engineering capability. And I think that's really important for us to maintain that side of competitiveness, so that we aren't left behind and that we can continue to innovate at the same pace, and then ensure that our staff continue to be workforce ready. They're competitive in next year's market too.
Thank you, Kamisha.
I'm
Anju.
going to piggyback on what Kamisha said. First of all, I don't believe this is her first panel. She is amazing. So when it comes to scenario planning, the real power, I feel, lies in expanding beyond what's probable to what's possible. Too often we plan for like 80% of the scenario, but the reliance comes on imagining the extremes, right? As Kamisha said, as the business takes downturn, what's going to happen? If it takes upturn, if there's freeze, then how do you do that? So one capability that I recommend HR practitioners to build, and I don't know if it's in your usual suspects, would be storytelling, strategic storytelling, because scenario planning is only valuable if our ability to translate the abstracts of what's if into a narrative that leaders and employee can see themselves. If you can tell a compelling story of what your company looks like in a downturn or in a hyper growth future model, people can emotionally connect and prepare and then align their actions. So data gives us a map, but storytelling actually puts it together and gets people on this journey. And that's the skill that unlocks the full value of scenario planning. So in one nutshell, scenario planning is only powerful if it's going to make people act on that. And then the most underrated skill is analytics combined with storytelling, hence strategic storytelling. Hope that helps.
And if I may piggyback off of you, Anju, so when it comes to like storytelling and really just kind of thinking out of the box, right? So when you're looking at the various scenarios, right, whether it's worst case, a disruptor's case, best case scenario, it's not just looking at what is tried and true within the organization, but really what are some of the things outside of the box, and really learning about or being knowledgeable about what else is out there. What are some of the other things, right? Is it sourcing in other regions that the organization currently doesn't have? Is it using, contractors? Is it using, third parties? Is it using freelancers? Whatever it is, it's just kind of really thinking outside of the box to ensure your resource planning is as effective as possible regarding all of these different scenarios.
Well, Carol, you're in the hot seat of going last. My heart goes out to you.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate what all my fellow panelists have said. And I think for me, if I think about, there's not a lot that I can add from a scenario planning perspective, but if I think about a capability or a skill that kind of ties all of what we've talked about together, so the data, the storytelling, the thinking broadly and strategically about other sources of talent, one of the fundamental skills that I think it's important to highlight or to continue to highlight for our HR practitioners is the ability to collaborate and build trust in the organization. Because if you articulate a variety of different scenarios, but you haven't built the trust and the credibility within the organization, all of these different efforts are going to fall flat. So again, I think for me, just reinforcing how important it is to continue to build that collaboration, the credibility and the trust within the organization so that you can affect these changes and really stay, as Anju has said, stay in that more predictive mode, stay in that forecasting state versus being behind and having to be more reactionary.
I would like to take us a step further and build on everything that you just shared, and maybe just anchoring it into Carol, what you highlighted, the environment of trust and credibility. I am really curious, what are some of the things that you do to bring the employee's voice into your strategic road mapping, so that whatever comes out of that process is not just the leadership's voice or the leadership's vision? How do you make sure that there is a balanced approach to the strategic road mapping? And maybe, Anju, I would invite you to be our pioneer for this one.
Absolutely. So this happens quite often. Loudest voices get heard first, or leaders' voices come through. But whenever our data points are coming from unidirection or only one direction, and we haven't considered most of it, then what we create is a solution that only serves certain number of people and not the whole organization. So being in the roles where we are, it's such a delicate, fine line of trying to manage leadership expectations, but also cater to employees at the same time, predicting the future. So I just wonder how come we don't have a future predictor built yet, but unfortunately we don't. And hence what we rely on is data. And this needs to come from various sources, which allow employees to be able to speak volumes, industry practitioners to be able to combine whatever analysis they're doing, the research they're doing, combine that. And I believe in relying the power of, in this virtual room, currently we have 100+ years of experience. Now, alone, I would never be able to account for that. So what I do is I rely on my peers, try and join communities and groups where I can get more information and best practices. So data collection from reliable sources, industry expertise, leadership voices, employee voices. We do a lot of surveys throughout the year too, whether that's manager effectiveness survey, onboarding surveys, as people have their work anniversaries during that time. So qualitative and quantitative data through that. And then I'll go back to my storytelling. So use that data to build story that you'd like to communicate, and hence build an action plan. That's the way we try to do, and I'm happy to hear what my peers are doing.
Unmuting competition, otherwise no pressure. Carol.
Yeah, I like to think of it, you talked a lot about, internal and external sources of data and, industry best practices. And I like to also marry that with a more of a microcosm of what's going on in the organization. So I like to think about some of the root causes and what are some of the things that we can do internally within the organization to create that right environment where we do have the multi-directional communication. And so I like to focus a lot on manager capability and building manager capability to have good conversations with employees, to make sure that they're setting up the conditions in the work teams where the work actually gets done so that we get the most robust feedback back. So, again, I think creating those right conditions, not only at the organizational level where leadership and the executives are communicating a vision for the future that's really compelling, but also, like I said, setting the conditions lower down in the organization to create multiple feedback loops. Because as we all know from working with people are going to engage in different ways. Some may engage with their manager, some may engage with a survey, some may want a confidential reporting tool, for example, to point out workforce problems. But the more that you have set those expectations across the organization that we want to hear from you, and we've created multi-channel solutions to be able to do that, I think that creates an environment where employees can more easily provide their feedback through multiple channels.
I also want to add on to both of your points. First, Andrew, your point about different points of data, so quantitative and qualitative, that's also something we do at Copilot AI. I think it's remiss to create a people roadmap without the people actually contributing to it. That's like half of the equation missing. So that's kind of just like huge oversight if you don't do that. And yeah, and like also we do like pulse surveys as well. I think it's like sometimes difficult and perhaps fatiguing for employees to do a lot of different surveys, and they feel that their voice, they're sharing their voice, but where it really comes about and where's the outcome from that. So something a little bit more low lift are pulse surveys that are really quick, short and snappy, 5 questions just done within the week. And then we can iterate quicker on the roadmap. And then for Carol's point, I wanted to also add on that with employees contributing to the roadmap and then circulating feedback mechanisms that way, we use tools such as a job success profile. We refer to them as JSPs, but it's pretty much what their job encompasses and the success criteria. So we can clearly identify what success criteria directly ties into, let's say, departmental and company-wide goals and objectives. And so then employees can feel that their contributions actually matter. It's tangible, what they're working so hard day in and day out, they're actually making a difference. And then lastly, for us, we also are really big on transparency. We're very transparent at Copilot. So we share a lot of documentation accessible for everyone, and that roadmaps are not static. They're always being refined and always pushing them to the next better iteration based on those feedback mechanisms that Carol mentioned, and based on data points, like to Andrew's point.
And I'll conclude that I think really the basis and the foundation of all of this is psychological safety, right? The data isn't only as good as the feedback that we're going to get from employees. And so we really want to make sure that we're creating a culture where employees feel safe in being able to share, whatever it is that they're feeling within the organization, whether it's a conversation with the managers, whether it's a pulse survey, whether it's evaluations on management. It really starts with having psychological, safety within that organization, because if not, then the data doesn't tell us really what really is going on in the organization.
Well, we are roughly in the middle of our conversation already. Jessa will keep me honest if I miscalculated time here, but I do have a personal curiosity. Now, I guess a standard moderator will ask this in the form of, what is your biggest learning from all the previous preparation cycles? But people don't use standard and classic when it comes to me very often, those who know me very well. So I will ask this with a twist. What is the most recent unlearning that you went through as you sat in preparation cycles? One thing that you held very closely to and you had to let go of. And everybody in the audience, if you have something that you want to share with all of us, please do drop it in the chat. Your biggest, most recent unlearning when it comes to preparation cycles.
I'll go back to uncertainty. I started our conversation with talking a little bit about uncertainty, but what I've experienced over the last several years is a drastic change in terms of what you planned for it on one side, and then what actually happened, whether that's with the economy, even thinking back to when COVID happened. If I think about the last 5 years, the biggest unlearning that I've had around planning is, and it sounds very basic, but scenario planning is very important, because if you just focus on one kind of static plan, the dynamics globally can shift so quickly. Dynamics economically, business lines can shift very quickly. And I think my biggest learning is, and unlearning is, that you can't just have a plan and put it on the shelf and expect to affect that plan. It is really about learning the discipline of scenario planning and thinking about what are all of the possibilities, even to Anju's point of, even if it's not 80%, but what's the wildest, Wild West worst case scenario that could manifest out there, and really thinking about what are the consequences for your business and for your people if those things happen. So I would say there's no such thing as going too far in your scenario planning. And that's been both my biggest learning and unlearning.
Carol, I agree with you. I'm a girl, glass half full kind of a person. But when it comes to scenario planning, I've always had to figure out how bad can it get and how good can it get, both ways. And it might sound extreme. And so my personal biggest unlearning, and especially in last few cycles, has been I used to think more data always provides us supporting for a better decision making. We'd gather endless dashboard, matrices, forecasting. But what truly moves the needle is few critical signals. So it's really, really important as you go through the motions of this to remove the noise and strip that away so you're able to focus on the exact signals. And this might be the biggest thing that's important and an unlearning that has happened to me, because we could get overwhelmed with data, and there could be distractions that take you away from the direction that needs to happen for a better decision making. And that has been really big for me. In today's environment, a good enough plan can pivot fast and far more valuable than a perfect plan that comes in too late.
I also want to add to that point, Anju. I feel that a lot of our points are similar. As you're speaking, it sparks something in my mind. So you mentioned something about perfection right now. I just also wanted to add that for me personally, in my growth journey, I am a huge perfectionist, and I am someone who likes to ensure that what I put forward is as polished and as vetted as possible before engaging relevant stakeholders. And so I think a lot of folks can resonate with that in the chat, perhaps. But in terms of like scenario planning and talent allocation, I think moving forward with a plan that is rough and doesn't have to be super polished is better than no plan. Or if you spend too long with decision making, and then there's decision fatigue, and then it just drags onwards and folks are left wondering and confused about what the path is. So I think that's also a huge thing for us at Copilot AI. We're trying to move things and move fast and break things along the way. And it's kind of encouraged to fail fast, and so that you can take those learnings and apply it to the next iteration and just continuously refine and get to that better outcome. And so that's my biggest unlearning, is that, yeah, having transparency in progress is better than waiting for the final, ultimate, perfected plan.
I think for me, it's a matter of influence and looking at the bigger picture, right? Staying focused on the bigger picture, right? Because Andrew mentioned, right, having the loudest voice in the room. And so if you're doing scenario planning with a particular manager or stakeholders, right, the person who holds the most influence in the room, right, sometimes has either the most resources allocated to them, or, the more budgets, allocated to them. And so I think it's a matter of really staying focus on the bigger picture, remaining neutral, and really asking the right questions, right? Because some people may not be prepared when we're talking about scenario planning, and it's our job to kind of guide them through and making sure that we're asking, really smart questions. And then there are other individuals, right, who already come well prepared and, again, have the loudest voice in the room. So really, one of the things that I've learned is not to be influenced in the room, but to stay true on really what is the long-term objective, what is the goal that we're trying to accomplish, and making sure that we navigate those conversations accordingly.
I do want to keep myself honest and come back and create the space for technology and AI. But before that, I will just take 20 seconds and share with all of you. Recently, I saw this wonderful definition for Gen Xers on social media. So I'm a Gen X, and it said, I am a Gen X. I try to embrace technology like a millennial, but I reserve the right to moan about it like a boomer. So how do you harness technology, and how do you use AI in your preparation cycle?
I can start us off. So what's really exciting is right now, not just within my company, but across various industries, there's the AI transformation happening. And I think that the one thing that I'd like to share is that it's to be used more so as a collaborator and something that compounds the outcome for folks. I know that there's inherent skepticism with AI and also the ethical applications with AI, especially with enterprise level. But for us, we're figuring out how to deploy agentic AI into our workflows and processes currently at Copilot. And so that also applies within HR processes such as workforce planning and talent allocation. There's a lot of really neat AI tooling out there and also some for free. So happy to also share that outside of this panel as well for folks who are interested. But for us, it's experimenting with agents and then reiterating again to the points I've mentioned above, and that AI is really a means to an end. You are the person still in charge of deploying these agentic processes and then playing around with it and figuring out and having fun, kind of like Lego. But at the end of the day, it's about compounding outcomes and creating greater business results for everyone.
And I'll just add to AI doesn't replace the strategy, but it accelerates it. It is helping us stress test our plans and unlock the hidden talent capacity before the market forces us to react. So use it as augmentation of your decision making. AI allow us to model multiple workforce scenarios like headcount growth, skill shifts, and cost impacts in like really minutes than weeks that you'd think. We've been using some of the AI powered models for people analytics to identify skill adjacencies where we are today, where the talent needs to be tomorrow. Again, using that as a sort of a predictive crystal ball, if you may, rather than assuming that we need to hire from outside. Another really cool strategy would be talent curation. What do you need to hire? Where can we do reskilling? Where do we need to upskill people? And how these internal mobility could take place. So it not just reduces cost, but also strengthen retention internally. So pressure testing assumptions, and if markets are shifting, demands are spiking, or budgets are tightening, we can instantly see the talent implications. And this agility allows us to really multifold our own productivity in scenario planning. And I encourage people to start and even take baby steps. If you don't think you're an expert in AI, it's totally fine. Most of us aren't yet. We're still learning and we're still growing. So keep an open mind, try baby steps, sort of dipping your toes in the pool. You don't have to go in the far end, but just give it a try. And safeguarding, of course, your data would be paramount. So keep that in mind.
What I've seen is a little bit more on, I think Kamisha and Anju are more on the cutting edge of implementations of AI into workflows and workforce processes. And I've seen and encouraged organizations to really take a thoughtful approach. So with some organizations, they need to develop an AI readiness strategy. And understand how they're going to deploy that and under what conditions in their organizations. So I really like what Anju was saying about dipping your toe into it and finding the right places from an organizational context that really do fit with what AI can help you do. Kamisha mentioned the word compounding, and that's something that I think AI is very powerful for. And taking a lot of data and helping you come up with recommendations, helping you think about what's your competition doing, pulling together a lot of those resources and giving you the ability to kind of fact check those. Because again, you don't want to take the human element out of it and have it be solely reliant on AI. Because I think we've all heard concerns about bias, concerns about accuracy. So you don't want it to replace all of those processes, but it can help you do a lot of the initial heavy lifting and analysis on some of those things. So I encourage organizations to really be thoughtful about your approach. Think about the overall strategy within the organization and how you're going to deploy it versus being the first early adopter out there, getting a whole bunch of tools that you're ultimately going to have to bundle together that may not work together as effectively. So being thoughtful and really leveraging where it can help you do the biggest heavy lifting are some of the things that I recommend when looking at AI.
And I would echo the same sentiment that my panelists have mentioned, right? Use it as a collaboration tool, right? Allow you to effectively use data better. I think that Andrew said it, perfect, right? Dip your toe in the water, see what works. If you start using it one way and it didn't work out, it didn't give you what you expected, try it a different way as well. I think that it'll, for us, we use it to identify performance gaps, right? And to be able to upskill. I think that those are things that definitely help us. It helps us with, giving additional data to our stakeholders. And so I think just being able to use it as an additional lever for all of the things that we're trying to accomplish, I think it's, very beneficial.
Well, very painful to say this is the Dr. Seuss moment. How did it get so late so soon? We're 5 minutes away from finishing this panel. But I do want to squeeze in one question, and you've been expecting it from me. For those of us who live in the reality of an HR function of one, is there anything out of everything we've covered so far that you do want to particularly call out or nuance, or do you have a specific advice for prioritizing for those of us who are an HR function of one? And the E-floor is all yours.
I can start off. I think my advice, also having been the solo HR practitioner before, so I do have direct experience with this. There's only one of you, so you can only focus on so many things. So I think what is important is trying to convey to stakeholders and the broader org that yes, what you're focusing on is important, but just as equally as important is why you're not focusing on XYZ as well. So that you take them along in the decision-making journey with you to get that buy-in. And then again, everyone is along the journey of road mapping with you. So I think it's just about focusing on, yes, what really drives business results and great outcomes for folks, but then equally as important, conveying the rationale for why XYZ does need to be parked for now.
I believe a lot of us have been in this position at some time or the other, being that powerful team of one. And in that case, I have empathy for you and understanding. So if you, as someone who's been both in large scale HR teams or HR of one roles, I want to call out one truth, that you can't do everything alone. And I guess it'll resonate because we just heard from Kamisha, it happens. You can't do everything alone and you shouldn't try. So 2 words. The power is in ruthless prioritization. For the HR function of one, my advice is anchor to the business impact. Keep that top of mind. If you need, just put a post-it note somewhere that reminds you, does it relate to the business impact? It goes back to my previous point of removing that noise. So you're able to focus on revenue, risk, retention, things that can't wait. Automate the repetitive. So use technology when possible, reminders, checklist, FAQs. Technology can be a multiplier when you can't support. Build your advisory role early. People that could be your board of advisors, where you can rely on, where you can get feedback, get best practices, etc. So believe in community. It takes a village to support a HR person. So ruthless prioritization and believe in the power of everybody else around you.
Lynn.
I would say that is really focused on data, right? In addition to everything else, right? You can't do it all, but the data is going to help you so much. It's also going to help you build credibility. So really make sure that your data is clean. I would also say that, yes, right, you can't do it all, and admit when there's mistakes or when you don't have all of the information, right? Rely on, like Andrew said, right, your advisors. Make sure that you establish a really great network, outside of the organization, within the organization as well. But truly what's going to help you is build your credibility is in that data.
And I would just add to kind of this topic off, don't feel like you have to do it all, right? So again, give yourself grace and permission. There may be things that if you're thinking about strategic road mapping and talent allocation and scenario planning, and a lot of the things that we have talked about could seem very overwhelming. You can start small, and it's okay to start small to introduce these more strategic talent practices into your organization. You don't have to do it all, again. And I think if you give yourself and build your credibility in the organization, you're going to be able to instill some of these practices. And if you have the data and the storytelling is and other things that we've talked about here along the way, it's going to help you build that case for maybe you don't have to be the only lone practitioner going forward, because you're going to need help implementing these more strategic practices into your organization. And it will be a value driver as you align it towards helping you make progress against your business priorities and goals.
Thank you all so very much. Now, I would rather ask for forgiveness than permission, and I will squeeze in one last question, but the answer must be one word. Don't speak faster to make it sound like one word. Pretend we have this conversation the last week of December of 2026. In one word, what does a successful preparing for 2026 would feel like at the end of 2026? One word. We will go clockwise, just one word. Kamisha.
Trust.
Anju.
Exhilarating.
Lynn.
Agility.
And Carol.
Flexible.
Thank you. Please stay on the link. You have a treat coming up to wrap the summit up. There's a panel on leading year-end planning. As a new CHRO or HR leader, it's moderated by the infinitely energizing Frank Gonzalez, and you will not be sorry for spending a little bit more time with us. Thank you, and I hope I will get to see you on my screen very soon. And Kamisha, well done.
right. Hello. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hello, friends. Happy Friday Junior or Friday Eve. Got those vibes. I love the energy. Hacking HR. Thank you for the music and then the kind of somber mindfulness as we kind of gather for our last, but certainly not least, panel of our 3-day summit. So if you are just joining us, you're in for a treat. If you've been with us throughout or looking forward to a playback and caught some different pieces, welcome back. Thank you for sticking with us. And don't forget to tune in to the next summit, which is actually just next week. I'm a people and culture executive with 2 decades of cross-industry experiences around a number of different functions, whether it be data-driven designs, inclusive initiatives, talent, and even organizational development. I'm Dr. Frank Gonzalez. You can call me Dr. Frankie G or just Frank or Frankie. Just don't call me late for dinner, as they say. I have the honor of serving as your moderator, but it's definitely not about me. It is about our panelists that we'll bring up shortly. You all just listen in. It's hard to follow up with my strategic partner, Manola. Thank you for that shout out with the strategic road mapping. You are here to listen in to some of our leaders and leading year-end planning as a new CHRO, people leader, or as a new HR leader. We're all in this together. We're all HR leaders. And as you all just heard from the previous panel, sometimes a team of one. So you are that focal point, the heart and soul of your people. Thank you, Hacking HR. Thank you to our panelists as we bring up our panelists, please, without further ado. And thank you, audience. Thank you, audience, for taking the time for yourself, your own self-development, and just pausing during all the busy times and really, really focusing in on your own needs, your own development, etc. So please interact, show some reactions, emojis, any kind of questions. I'll do my best to curate that. And our wonderful panelists here that we have, those smiley faces. I love it. Woo, we're gonna be in for a treat. I got my pen, I've got my notepad because I'm still very traditional in that to like to incorporate all the senses. I would type it up, but generally if I write it down, it's stuck to memory, etc. So without further ado, and we're gonna start off kind of clockwise. So Hannah, I'm gonna come to you in just a moment, but I'd love to hear a little bit of perhaps a little bit of your intro, why you said yes to this subject, because I think that's really critical. It draws in a little bit of your personal and even some of your professional kind of influence. Why did you say yes? And especially when we start to think about getting into a new HR leadership role, whether you're new to that role, maybe you've kind of come into that role, you've inherited a team. There's just so many things that come with that. Buy-in, influence, getting a sense of where we're at, perhaps sometimes a little bit of resistance, or perhaps some folks are they're just so on board, but you got to kind of slow down and triage or prioritize things. Love to kind of get a little bit of your take on that as we kind of prime for our chat today. So Hannah, I'd love to start with you. Tell us a bit about yourself, why you said yes, and just any kind of insights that you can share with us.
I mean, we've all been in this role where it's your first time. That's one thing that's a guarantee, is that we've all at least done this once before. If not, it feels like maybe every year you do this every time as you feel a little new in role. And especially when you're new in role, you maybe haven't found your community yet that you can tap into, and you're struggling to be able to either know who you could raise your voice to, or maybe feel uncomfortable raising your hand to answer some of the really tough questions that a lot of people are facing. And so I think the more we can demystify that, bring our knowledge and expertise together to really support the next generation of those that are doing it for the first time or just going through it and having a tough time, I think is going to be really important. So hence why I'm so glad that this is, we're pulling together such a great group of people to be able to talk through that and demystify and supporting those along in their own journey.
Thank you so much. Kim.
Hey there. Well, first, thank you. I always enjoy doing these panels. I think similar to what Hannah was saying is that, we've all been in this role the first time. And even if you've done this one place, if you changed companies, whatever it is, there's oftentimes, you're going through this new process. Even I've had the experience of going through, it felt like a new process in the same organization, but you have a different finance team kind of leading. So I think that it's really, I think that I just want to be supportive of those, my peers who are in this, and just have that community, share my experience that I've had in similar situations, and just kind of help.
Love it. Thank you. Erin.
Hi, everyone. Excited to be here with this amazing panel. Thank you, Frank, for the introduction. And for those in the audience, hope this resonates with you. I decided to opt into this panel because I changed into an HR and people career later in my own career. So I started on the commercial side of businesses, had some learning and development experience, but decided to move internal to people operations as kind of my third career. And I joined as number 13 in a startup and kind of had to train myself on how to lead processes, and especially around year-end strategy, and really tapped into a network, things like Hacking HR, other newsletters, and really just had to rely on my network to help build me up. So similar to what Kim and Hannah said, I want to pay that forward to people who may be first in seat. I'm also typically the first HR hire. I've gone through this in 4 different startups. So have really seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And to some of the other points, working in a small organization, an up and coming organization, it really feels like a different company every year you go through this. So just wanted to give a lot of love to those who are going at this solo, because I think that can be really difficult, and hope you can find some champions in your own organization to bounce ideas off of. But this panel is certainly here to be your thought partner early into Q4. So excited to be here.
Did you say 4? Did I? Okay, yeah, okay. We're bringing lots of experiences, my friends. So thank you, audience participants. You are definitely in for a treat, and lots of wealth of experience. And I also want to acknowledge one of our panelists, Chrissy, was having some tech issues. We all have to deal with that from time to time. So she sends our best wishes, and hopefully will join us for another panel. Dr. Lauren.
Hey everyone, and Frank, seems we're meeting again here. I am Dr. Loran Stor-Rajuezo out of Boston, Massachusetts, and gosh, I've been in this position more times than I care to think about. When you step into an HR leadership seat mid-year, you're not entering a blank slate. You're stepping into an inherited ecosystem of a legacy of decisions, cultural residue, right, and quiet dysfunction that everyone's learned to work around. And that's exactly why this topic matters, because HR isn't just about managing systems. It's about diagnosing, disrupting, and rebuilding them. For me, this is personal. I've stepped into leadership roles mid-year more than once, sometimes following a beloved leader, or other times stepping into the vacuum where HR is reactive or missing altogether. In both cases, I had to quickly move from observer to operator to architect. And I think you'll hear that in a lot of my answers. This conversation isn't theoretical. It really is a survival strategy for human resources and those of us who are reshaping and elevating the HR function while it's still in operation.
I love that. Inheriting an ecosystem. Oof, I wrote that one down. And I wrote down some other keywords that just kind of helped me. And thank you. Started with you, Hannah. I know, the ability to raise hand. And Kim, you mentioned community. Erin, you talked about, this idea of tapping into. You've also done it, and so has Dr. Lauren done it quite a few times that we don't want to mention. But that inheritance of an ecosystem is absolutely right. It makes me think about, there's a book out there, Raheem, and it's the Conflict Management in Organizations. It's for those that like data, but a little bit of practicality. It's, for some, it's like, it's kind of numbing. You're like, no, but it's real practical. And in the middle of it, it talks a little bit about, there's people that have their expectations, right, wrong, or indifferent, favorable, unfavorable, or just neutral. They have expectations of you as you step into that. So I want to stick with you, Dr. Lauren. We'll kind of go counterclockwise this time and just expand a little bit about what you all were talking about, those, that influence, getting that buy-in, especially when there's expectations, roadmaps, maybe a little bit of resistance or favorability? You know, how do you really approach that, whether you're inheriting that ecosystem, as you said, or this spectrum of perhaps the ecosystem's a little bit more evolved? Either way, it comes with a bit of expectations.
Love that. You know, I think when you step into this, you have to look at everything that's in front of you, and you have to look at it from 3 different lenses, right? What is sacred, right? What's culturally protected, but possibly outdated? What's performative? What looks good but delivers nothing? And then what's essential in that ecosystem, right? Tied directly to business values. From there, don't overhaul, triage. Don't waste time pretending broken things still can function, because they can't. And in human resources, there's a lot of broken stuff, right? In organizations, there's a lot of broken stuff. And organizations haven't leaned on human resources to help strategically realign or recreate those systems to move forward. The real art is knowing when to call out dysfunction and call it out loud versus quietly redirecting. And I think as HR practitioners, we need to reset our mind. We need to actually call it out, because we're not doing anyone a favor. And I'm sure, like the rest of us, I'm not here to be your friend. I'm here to lead an organization's talent to drive business outcome.
Awesome. Thank you. Erin?
So if we're talking about the theme of kind of coming into an inherited system, I have kind of 2 different lenses on this. One is, I think, when I was first stepping into a first HR seat and grew into this kind of head of people role, one thing that I failed at doing, and I think some of the best things we learn are things that failed, I tried to do everything all at once. And there was pulled in many different directions with very few resources. And so the way that I like to think about it is that Maslow's hierarchy of needs in terms of your organization. So if your payroll system is broken and people aren't getting paid on time, why start with performance management? Like, this is never going to, if this isn't fixed, people are never going to be able to focus on the next tiers up. So really making sure that you have the systems in place on the foundation, your benefits in place on the foundation before you move to the next step, and making sure, in addition to that, that you're plotting with the executive team, not independently. It's really important to get that buy-in very early, and you as the HR leader, the people leader, know where you need to focus first. A lot of times they're going to want you to think about this other thing over here, and you need to kind of draw them back in and say, yeah, that's really important, and we do need to get there, but before we can roll out performance management and 360s, we need to train our managers. So there's often some consistency into what you see is broken when you come into these systems and inherit them that you need to focus on first, as Dr. Loran said. So it's important that you do that hierarchy and not try to do everything at once, because you'll do most things 50% instead of those things along the way at 100%.
Oof, I gotta remind myself that I'm moderating because I'm taking so many notes, and I'm like, oh, I'm getting mesmerized by what y'all are saying. I'm like, yes, yes, yes. And y'all are getting a lot of affirmation in the comments as well, folks. One of the things that I'll call out here is HR for HR. Oof, that was deep. So I see you. I see you. I know. I see you, audience. I see you. What say you, Kim?
Well, you know, with anything, so whether it's budgeting, strategy, whatever we're talking about, I think as you enter into a new role, it's really important to listen and learn. So I too, similar to Erin, have stepped into a number of HR roles where it was, it's private equity. I was the new HR person from a carve out, and so rebuilding, restructuring, and in the midst of chaos, taking over from an HR leader who had expanded her role and moved on, and so there's a lot of different pieces to it. So yes, there's the leadership wants these things fixed, and this is their vision of how that might work. But really, I think before you can make a plan, whether it's where to invest or whether it's what changes, is really what's made me successful in this, where I'm at now, is learning. Help me understand why we're doing this. I think that we could do something different. However, I want to understand how do we get to where we're at? What's important for me to consider before moving forward? One is for me right now is also our HRIS system. I got there and nobody liked our HRIS system. And candidly, I think we can all say nobody loves their HRIS system. It just whatever it is we implement, we think it's going to be awesome. And then, it is what it is. But before I could make that decision on, hey, yes, I think we need to go through this because I have implemented systems from Bamboo HR to Workday. I know what goes into it. I know what time it takes. I know it's not just this is a new application. And so before I want to look at budgeting and planning, I want to make sure that this system that we have is functioning the way it's supposed to, and then we can make that decision. So that's a long answer to that. But I think that really just understanding how we got to where we're at before we can make a decision on what to do going forward.
Nobody loves their HRIS system? No way. Come on, Kim. You're by yourself. You're a team of one on that one. Just kidding.
Absolutely.
I'm guessing by the silence on the comments, it just like woo, that struck something. But I love what you were talking about, is balancing and learning what you from them. You come in with a fresh set of eyes a lot of times, and your experiences, etc. Right? And sometimes folks get very, this is a very psychosocial word, but you get institutionalized into your rhythm of work, routine. It's a human gravity. We love routine. We like adventure, but we like routine. And that kind of routine, you're coming in fresh set of eyes, but you're learning, and so it becomes a little bit more palatable. And Erin, there was a nice little call out for you in the chat, but the focus around foundational stuff. Very good take on that. So a lot of affirmations I just want to bring forth in the chat, and thank you. Hannah, over to you, my friend.
There's been so many good things that maybe I'll do a little double click on one of the ideas, like a hot tip kind of moment, rather than going on kind of full scale plans. And I think the place I'll double click is on the concept of prioritization, because I definitely think that's the name of the game here. You've got to move really, really quickly from problem identification to solution. And you really need to get others to weigh in on that. Because you're going to have bias that you're bringing in from your lens of either the role you were sitting in before or what the other organization that you may have been working at previously. But remember that the people that are influencing you also have bias too. And if you're having to move quickly, it's Q4. We're all setting our business plans right now, or the vast majority of companies are. And think about who's sliding into your inbox and who's sliding into your calendar. Those are likely the people who have the biggest voice at the table, but is that really representative of the people you need to be getting to? And so be really thoughtful about the process that you're going through as you prioritize as to who is influencing it, because it's fast moving, it's fast paced, and that just breeds environments for bias in there. And so just be really conscious about who you're inviting in versus who's kind of barging their way in to try and influence some of the decisions that you're making this time of year. And then the best concept of anything is to test, iterate, redo, test, iterate, redo as you go through it. So don't set and leave it. Make sure that you're doing multiple rounds to massage it over time.
Audience, did I not say that we're bringing the fire? What's bigger than a fire? Like I don't know, just a full-on flame, I guess. The heat, bringing the heat. Look at, oh gosh, again, I have to remind myself that I'm like, wait, Frank, I'm moderating. Take some notes, enjoy just like a participant, but hold on, I gotta I have a duty to perform here. But so many things have been said, and Hannah, I want to, as you mentioned, we're going to quadruple click. I'm going to stay with you. We'll come back around again, because you mentioned some things, and many of you all mentioned some things around that lens. The kind of, there's kind of this balance. Dr. Laura, you mentioned something that things that are sacred, and it reminds me of kind of those rituals or things that are going on, those rhythms that are going on already. It's so much to be said about the learning, etc., but the adaptation of, prioritization. Again, you're stepping in, you're learning, you're going to bring that. There's expectations, etc. I'm here to deliver, and I think for many of us in HR, we come in from it and this huge heart. I'm not your friend, but huge heart, a passion to deliver. I am a business partner. I'm here to deliver. But with that comes this need to adapt prioritization so that you can deliver at that scale. So I'm curious from you all's perspective, and again, I'm going to stay with you, Hannah, on this, is when you think about the need to perhaps reset, and there's just so many things that can be said about that. Whether it might, you have to prioritize certain things, you maybe have to sunset others, you have to surface things that been memorialized again and kind of knock off the dust a little bit of that, right? And perhaps involve that in your roadmap. How do you approach that? And what advice would you give for new CHROs or new HR leaders?
I don't think you're going to get anywhere if you frame any of that as being great HR ideas. Bold, you can put as many descriptors in the front as you want. Bold, AI-driven, bodacious, whatever it is that you use to get someone's attention. The problem there is not that descriptor word. It's actually the word that came after that, which is that this is an HR idea. How many of the things that you're actually doing are because it benefits HR or for HR only? And my guess is that the vast majority are not. And so it's the framing of these decisions that it needs to be about business impact, people impact, shareholder impact. That's how you're going to get and grab the attention properly in order to actually move things forward. The worst thing you can do is create an HR plan from the perspective of HR. And so you need to be able to launch off from there. And I think that's going to give you a really great starting point, is when you reframe the actual noun there, which is HR, over the adjective in front.
Love it. Reframe. Thank you, Hannah. Kim?
Well, kind of along those lines, I think speaking the language of the business. So yes, if I went in and said, hey, this is what a good HR thing is to do, performance reviews or whatever it is that I'm coming forward with, it's really to tie it to the business outcomes. How is this going to impact the business? What is that return on the investment? Why should you listen to me and what I'm trying to propose, and really help tie those things together? So you can tie it to the different metrics, whether it's you're doing the performance, you want to maybe set up competencies or something like that, so that we're now assessing employees based on this core thing, instead of we were doing it very subjective. Now let's do it with a little more data, and then show how that can that change can directly impact the bottom line of the business.
And you have some fan base, Kim, out in the comment section. Somebody says that you're just so practical. You're very practical in your approach. It's a good balance that you have. So thank you for that.
That is not the first time I've heard I'm practical.
Hey, I think that is a great gift, my friend. That's a compliment, I'd say. So, Erin, what about your builds?
So I'm just kind of building on what Kim said. I think building these as business imperatives, not HR imperatives, and using the data that you can gather internally, but I would also say benchmarking externally. I've gotten a long way, and perhaps this is different in smaller organizations than it might be in legacy organizations, but with FOMO, like other companies at our stage trying to recruit talent are doing this, or we are lacking in this. And if you can get benchmark data on that, there's a variety of resources out there to do that and lead with that FOMO. I've found that can go a long way, because no one wants to hear that our organization is lagging behind another one. And I've been fortunate to see there's a couple tools like this, but I've been using Aladdin, which helps you score your organization in a variety of things. And it tells you the ROI if you focus on each one. That helps you prioritize using data to show, if we focus on talent management, we'll see X amount of ROI based on efficiency within the organization, productivity, reduction of turnover, all of these different things. So if you can kind of balance that internal data with external benchmarks and lead with that, hey, we're gonna be outpaced here by our competitors, and that's something that every, I think, CEO will jump on, because just like in sales, we don't want to lose to our competition, and internally, our stakeholders are our team. So think about us needing to close those recruiting deals, us needing to close that deal when we have someone who's about to jump ship for another company, these initiatives help the business keep that internal revenue.
I love how you said FOMO. I love that. And for those that may be unfamiliar with that acronym, it's the fear of missing out. And an organization absolutely is like a person. And there's an organizational development formula for those that are unfamiliar. It is the personality of your most senior leader or that function that you're describing, plus the stated values of the organization. They're aspirational, doesn't matter. Those values, plus what behaviors actually go on, equal the true culture or personality. And sometimes, if your most senior leader is kind of projecting FOMO, it absolutely is. It's a real thing. Your organization is like, we're a small organization, we're chasing this, or we're a big organization and we're chasing adaptability and agility, when that's not us. We're a huge ship, not a little boat, right? We can't move as quickly. So that really does influence the prioritization and kind of that personality of the organization. So thank you for saying that. And again, another well-rounded answer, as said in the comments. They said well-rounded answers was one of the comments that stood out. So thank you for that. Dr. Lauren, what say you?
I have to say, I am loving this panel. I feel like we are all akin and in the same lane, where we see HR as that strategist, right? The business propeller. And when it comes to perception, to tag on to, yes, the data and right to the activities, I am all right, changing that conversation, then backing it up with action. I don't walk in talking about policies or onboarding or performance reviews. I walk in asking questions like, where are we losing velocity? What's happening with our end user, right? What's the leadership bottleneck? Why is that happening? Or where's our culture breaking down in ways that's going to cost us consumers or talent? Those are business questions. And that's what I'm loving about this panel, is that we are all business focused, because human resource is business focused. And that's the shift. When fatigue or resistance is high, I don't fight the current. I redirect it. I simplify it. You're right, I scaffold it. And I focus on one big problem the business wants to solve, then deliver fast, visible progress. And that's how that trust starts. If I'm the first HR leader or stepping in after a legacy departure, I double down on my clarity and credibility. I don't overpromise, I overdeliver on what matters most, which really for human resources is that alignment, transparency, and transaction. So it's elevating, right? We want to change that perception, then we have to elevate human resources, and it starts at the top as strategic business partners that drive business. You're going to hear me say that repeatedly, because that's our Achilles heel right now in HR.
We literally modeled realignment just now. I thought we were going to lose. Hannah, welcome back. So we literally realigned and modeled that. That was planned, audience, just so you know. But yes, absolutely. That's strategic. And a team of one, you're going to be playing three roles sometimes. You're the strategist, you're the implementer, and you're also the executioner many times. And you're like, I feel stretched. You are. You're literally playing three roles. And if you have the fortunate to have a more mature HR function, then perhaps you can focus on maybe two or maybe one of those kind of elements. But regardless, in my opinion, a great HR leader should have all three of those mindsets, right? A strategist, the ability to implement and kind of roadmap it out, but then also execute and get kind of, as I say, get dirty, right? Maybe you step in on some of your accumulated skill sets that you built over as an HR, whether you started as an HR generalist or you got into it, fell into it. I've heard so many different stories in the road mapping, but I love the pieces. This is what I took away. An audience, maybe you can agree, is the reframing, the language. Speak the language of the business. And what does that really mean? That means don't use HR speak, perhaps, right? I think that was said by Kim or others, was, we don't say performance manager. We just say during this season for growth, or as we are ending in Q3, use some of the language. One organization I worked with, they did it in periods. The whole organization functioned on periods. They were approximately 2.5 weeks long, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter, but it's periods. So use the language, right? So I would come in with the leaders and say, so which period is heavy on, consumer products or something, right? And they'd be like, oh, okay. So you use their language, but in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, when can I launch some of these, as said, these ideas or these initiatives for the people, right? Or, I got to factor into that. And so that's what it's, using that speak. As finance is not going to learn your language, you're not going to learn finance language, or maybe you immerse them together. But definitely benchmark. I love that piece too. Benchmarking, regardless if there's FOMO or not, that can be a thing. Kim, I'm going to come to you, and as we start to, and these experiences go by so quickly. With our last 10 minutes, if any questions come up, I'll try to pull that from the audience. But Kim, I'm going to come to you as we kind of think about lessons learned, takeaways, whether it be from, so I say boldly, a mistake that we've made, because I think those are learning opportunities for a lot of us, right? Maybe a burnout moment, because we've done HR of one, many of us, or audience members, there's a lot of folks that are having to be in HR of one. Maybe an unconventional decision that kind of shaped your outlook. What would be kind of your thoughts on that, takeaways for the audience?
Oh gosh. So I think that we all do this in especially in HR. We have the unique position of supporting every function, regardless of what industry we're in, from the individual contributor, customer service, sales, whatever it is, we work with all of them, and we have all of these different stakeholders, and they all want something different. And I think that when you first start out, especially, we're in this because we like people. I mean, some days we may not feel that same way because of some, how the day went, but we got into this because we really want to support organizations, and we want to do great things. And it's finding those boundaries and having to be able to say no in a way that's intentional, such as, a yes, and yes, I can do this. And, but we need to make some other changes in order for me to do this, because I need to, not just for me, if it's a party of one, but also for a team. I've certainly watched my team get, again, private equity or small startups, when we're moving really, really fast and they want a new HRIS system or new whatever, they also need to hire a bunch of people, and we're going to be doing these other things, and they throw everything at us. And I just want to, just reiterate, those boundaries will protect you going forward, because you can't do everything all at once well. And you want to be able to establish that trust.
Maybe I'll just jump in on that one, because I want to elaborate a little bit, because this is definitely my first multiple years. It's probably going to be the mistake I make again this year, is what you do in that case. And one of the hardest things to navigate is what needs to be set and resourced versus what you're flexible about, whether you're a team of one. And often, especially when you're new, you want to do everything. You're a small startup or scale up, like in your case, Kim, and they want to do everything, right? You're keener to change the world and bake it all in at the start of the year, and you know exactly what's going to happen in Q4, and then stuff, and I probably slightly more expletive than stuff happens, but stuff happens. And so this idea of not setting and leaving or having to do it all, I think, is a really great tip that I still need to remind myself of every year. The balance probably changes between Q1 and Q4. You've got more in the commitment bucket in Q1 than you do in Q4. The amount of change you're experiencing as a business, but what Q4 looks like is probably a little bit more cloudy. probably needs, it's going to look a little hazy in terms of what those things are. And so it's okay if that doesn't all look the same over each of the quarters, but to not fully commit at that start and then have to backtrack from there. So a little bit of flexibility in all of that planning, because man, I got to teach myself that lesson every single year when I go into this time of year.
Yeah, I would say one thing that I think is kind of parallel to some of these conversations, and something that I've made the mistake on, is thinking, one, I could do it all, but also not thinking that the organization could change and move as fast as I could, and not taking the time to actually change manage within the company. So moving from 0 to 360 reviews and manager conversations versus phasing it out with step 1, job architecture and leveling, step 2, training, step 3, system, step 4, training, coaching, system, and making sure that you're making yourself time to do that, because the worst thing that we can do is roll out a system or a process and have it flop because we tried to push everything out the door so fast and didn't take the time to help the organization change along with us. Because I think we as HR practitioners and leaders move very quickly, and we know what's right in our heads, and we just assume everybody else is on the same page and thinking about these things as much as we are, and they're just doing their day job. So it's important to bake in that time to bring people along in the journey with us.
I love this conversation. I think, I think back to when I started as an HR leader, and I'm hearing like all the resonation with everyone's response here. For me, it came down to overfunctioning, taking everything on, thinking everything had its importance. Every gap, every broken system, I was rewriting strategies. I was up all night, right, trying to solve other people's problems. That result was exhausting. From there, I think that's when I started to really start to reshape how I approached end of year planning, where I am a ruthless prioritizer. Not everything makes the cut, and I give myself permission to do that, because we want everything to make the cut, right? And I distribute that ownership throughout my team to lead their own lanes. So, right, it's at that end of year planning, if you have strategically developed your people in HR, then you can distribute that ownership and take some of that burden off your shoulder. And then I challenge that false urgency, because everybody wants something today. And just because it's loud doesn't mean it's important. I've been in many leadership meetings where, I've got people jumping up and down saying, I need this now. Do you? Do you really need it now? Give me the business case. I lean really heavily on my business language. I intentionally pause at the end of the year, not just to reflect, but to forecast my energy for the upcoming year. So for 2026, because strategy without sustainability is what I like to call performance art. And I don't want to get burnt out. And it sounds like all of us on this panel are in alignment there.
Oh my gosh. All right, just take a moment. As you take a moment, audience, please start, show some love with your emojis, do that emoji thing, click, show, a little round of applause virtually. And please, panelists, a virtual round of applause for yourself, because you're sharing and building, community, or strengthening our community through all your experiences and wisdom. And you actually answered one of the last questions in the chat was, is this possible in achieving with work-life balance, etc.? Well, there's going to be an imbalance, but if you listen to our experts here, it's giving yourself permission and adapting prioritization. And just because, as Dr. Laura said, just because you're the loudest doesn't necessarily mean that it's, and if I can surface something, Kim, behind the scenes is, we're HR, not ER, necessary emergency room, right? But it's this adaptation of maturity models. You got to adapt maturity models so that we can prioritize things. There's so many out there. And if your company, regardless of 200 or 2 million, right, adapt some sort of maturity model so that you know where and what functions that you can co-lead and co-design, or you have to build up their capability. I want to thank, again, our panelists. Audience members, please thank yourself for participating and spending this time for yourself. year-end planning isn't just about closing the books, right? It's about the opportunity to open perhaps a new chapter. And I would end with a quote by Michael Porter, who's quoted a lot of times in different kind of business strategies, etc. Strategy is about making choices, trade-offs. It's about deliberately choosing to be different, perhaps. So thank you again. Wonderful summit. Stay tuned for the Talent Strategy and Acquisition Summit, September 2nd through 4th. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Hacking HR. Thank you one more time again to our wonderful panelists.